Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Mormon Stories Podcast. I'm your host, John DeLynn. It is May 14th, 2021, and we are here for part two of an episode that I think is a really historic and important Mormon Stories Podcast episode. For those who joined us earlier in this week or who just listened to the previous episode, we were so fortunate, so blessed to have JT and Lady Cee on Mormon Stories Podcast. JT and Lady Cee are two of the most prominent and well-known YouTubers who were former members of the Jehovah's Witnesses. And they have a YouTube channel that is wildly popular. They have been doing this for many years. In some sense, they're the OGs of ex-Jehovah's Witness YouTube, and they're funny and they're soulful and heartfelt and experienced, and they're wise, and they're back for part two of this epic interview. We did, 3 hours with you guys before, and that just wasn't enough, 3 hours. Yeah. And we covered so much ground. We covered you guys, your experiences being raised in the church. We talked about your courtship and when you guys met. We talked about living the lifestyle, all the demands of being Jehovah's Witnesses. We talked about shunning. We talked about, the church organization and the leaders of the church. We talked about how you get ahead. We talked about what it does to families to have differences in faith within the church, how people can get alienated from their families. We talked about disfellowshipment and shunning and backlash, what happens when you speak out publicly. We talked about conditional love in the community. We talked about getting married fast and young, and marriages that sometimes shouldn't have ever happened. We talked about Jehovah's Witnesses discouraging their members or de-emphasizing the bearing of children. We talked a lot about the second coming and Armageddon. How Jehovah's Witnesses aren't encouraged to necessarily get education, so that people are kind of indebted to the church and dependent on the church. We talked about so much community and missionary work and the missionary zeal. And oftentimes how church workers can be mistreated. We talked about military service and how that's discouraged, and blood transfusions, and the LGBT members of the church. There's just so much that we talked about how the church handles abuse and sexual abuse and cover-ups. So much women in the church. There's so much that we covered, and we were just scratching the surface. And so I was so thankful that at the end of that, where I'm like, oh my gosh, we've got so much more to cover, JT and Lady Cee agreed to come back to Mormon Stories for yet another interview. And so they're back. Thank you, JT and Lady Cee, for joining us again.
Thank you for having us back as well.
Thank you for having us. Yeah. We appreciate it.
And I have to say, the feedback has been overwhelmingly positive. People have loved our time together. They loved you guys. You're funny, you're witty, you're smart, you're experienced, you're wise. And so we're just so glad to have you back.
Yeah, it's good to be back. It's a very serious subject, but as they often say, if you don't laugh, you'll cry. So we try to put a balanced approach towards it.
Exactly. Tell them really quickly your YouTube channel, your website. I just want to get shout outs to that right at the very beginning.
Website is xjwcriticalthinker.com. If you go to, I'm sorry.
No, that's right. That's good.
Okay. And then if you go to our YouTube, if you go to YouTube and you put in the search, XJW Critical Thinker, and we're also on an audio podcast. And I know we're broadcasting through iTunes. So if you go to iTunes and type in Critical Thought, that's the name of the podcast. So critical thinkers have a critical thought. So that's what that's all about.
I love it. I love it. Check all that goodness out. Follow them. Their YouTube channel is so funny and brilliant, as it all is. So glad to have you here. Shout out to my buddy Jason Moore from Sugarland, who put us all in touch. He's the reason this all happened. And he was tenacious with me. My Houston brother from a different mother, he was tenacious with me about doing this interview. And now I'm wondering, why did I freaking wait so long? I'm kicking myself. And as if this weren't all enough, we're going to be joined today by my good buddy, my colleague, Gerardo, who is my cinematographer. He helps me look good, but he creates the thumbnails. He's a graphic designer, and he's also a brilliant, thoughtful human. Yeah. Gerardo, why did you want to join us for today's episode?
Hi, John. Thanks for having me. So the reason why I wanted to join was because during my 2-year mission in Mexico City, I became really fascinated with the Jehovah Witnesses. And so I studied a lot about their doctrines, and not only that, but I would go and look for their old books, purchase them on eBay while on my mission, and collect their old books, and sometimes carry them around with me, because there's so many Jehovah Witnesses in Mexico City. It has grown super fast. So we would see them on the street all the time. So I would carry these old books from the Jehovah Witnesses to prove them that their doctrines have changed. And with time, I was able to figure out what things made them kind of think a little bit more, what things triggered them, and kind of there's the strengths and also their weaknesses of their doctrines. So because of my fascination with Jehovah Witnesses, I asked you if I could co-host this episode.
Yeah, so we'll welcome and love your questions and impressions, Gerardo, as we go today.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, we look forward to your thoughts as well, because you're able to give a perspective of a non-Jehovah's Witness as you deal with witnesses and how they respond when you raise issues. Most people don't raise issues because most people know very little about the doctrines. So it'd be interesting to see what you have to add as well. It should be very interesting. Very good.
Yeah. I was actually able to go to different elders' homes and be with my companion and preach to their families. So at one time we went to one of their meetings where they do, can't remember, I don't know what the translation is in English, but where they do the bread and the wine, and where nobody takes of it. We went to that. So yeah, I had quite an experience with Jehovah Witnesses.
Mm-hmm.
The passing of the bread and wine is very unique.
Right.
When it comes to Jehovah's Witnesses, very unique.
Right.
Okay, so we covered so much in our last episode, and we've got so much to cover today.
Okay.
I wanted to begin with the question I was dying to ask you guys last time. Mormonism, for all the, there are positives and negatives about any organization. And we're not going to be focusing on the positive things about Mormonism today, because the church does a really great job of telling the world about how great it is. And, who are we to disagree with that? What I am going to say is that Mormonism was born and conceived in racism. And that's a shocking thing for Mormons to hear. Mormons, bear with me. I am one of you in so many ways, but Joseph Smith comes out with this book that basically claims, and it's still Mormon scripture today, that Native Americans, that we all, would see, Native Americans were cursed with dark skin by God as a curse for their wickedness, or the wickedness of their ancestors. And that's a basic narrative structure in the Book of Mormon. Light-skinned Nephites, dark-skinned Lamanites, they had the dark skin because they were cursed with the mark, and the white and delightsome, Nephites were killed off by the dark and loathsome Lamanites, and that's the Book of Mormon. And if anybody wants to argue with that, you're literally arguing with reality. And I also want to say I'm feeling this anxiety and sadness that I'm speaking in such an offensive and shocking way, but this is Mormon doctrine and theology. And so it's awful, and it's reality. And then if you want to just take it one worse step further, even though early in the church's history, there were some people of color that were baptized by Joseph Smith. By the time you get Joseph Smith's successor, Brigham Young, people of color were told you're not allowed to be members in good standing in the Mormon church. You can't go to the temple. You can't do all the high rituals in the church, and men can't hold the priesthood, and you're basically second-class citizens in the Mormon church. And this was true all the way through the civil rights era, all the way through Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, all the way through all that until 1978, when the church, after decades of pressure, finally relented and allowed people of color to be members in full standing. That is Mormon church doctrine and history. And by the way, the nasty, distasteful Book of Mormon stuff is still in the Book of Mormon that we teach as God's most correct book on the earth. And the church teaches this Book of Mormon is the cornerstone of Mormonism. Now, I'm wasting time, but that is Mormon doctrine and theology. And I got in trouble recently for saying something that hurt a lot of people's feelings, rightly so. I asked the question, how could a person of color ever convert to the Mormon church given its racist teachings? And that's offensive because it's insulting, and people join religions for all sorts of reasons that don't have anything to do with being intelligent. And what we actually know is many people who join cults are highly intelligent. And so it was a bad thing to say for all those reasons. But now, with all that background, I'm going to ask you guys three big questions. Does the Jehovah's Witness Church have a history of racism? And if so, what is that? Was your experience in the Jehovah's Witness organization, was there racism built into that? And if so, how? And then, how do you make sense of race and the Jehovah's Witness movement today, and people that might still be converting to the Jehovah's Witness, like people from Mexico or like people from Africa? So let's tackle racism and the Jehovah's Witness movement, and we'll just give you guys as much time as you want to talk about that.
Okay. That's a very good question. And the answer is an interesting answer because it's a developing answer. This religion was started by a gentleman. His name was Charles Taze Russell. And Charles Taze Russell, interestingly, he came up in a time where the views toward race was clearly defined, that there was no question about it in the 1800s. In fact, part of his teachings was that one day Black people will return back to the blessed color, which would be white. So there was a lot of this racial attitude that brought itself right along into the teachings of Jehovah's Witnesses. Now, it's interesting because Jehovah's Witnesses, as in many areas, they often do things that's a little bit different. And one of the things that kind of make Jehovah's somewhat unique, especially for their time, is that they actually begin to address racism and the color issue in a certain way. On one hand, they took a few steps forward. On the other hand, they took 2 or 3 steps back. For example, a lot of people who came with this, like with my parents, in fact, that was actually one of the reasons that my family became Jehovah's Witnesses. During the late 50s and early 60s, the civil rights movement was really kicking off. And as I mentioned before, my mom had a white Jehovah's Witness come to the door. And that was one of the questions that my mother asked. Do you people worship together? And the lady said, yeah, we have integrated religion. We worship the same place. And this was actually during the time when the Watchtower Society was starting to integrate congregations, because at one time in the United States specifically, there were white congregations and Black congregations. And so when the laws changed, they began to integrate the congregations. So when my mom went to the Kingdom Hall and she literally saw and heard a white man reach out and shake the hand of an African American and said, "Good morning, my brother," my mom knew that this must be the true religion. And the reason why is very simple. Many religions, as they often say, 11 o'clock on Sunday morning is the most segregated place in America. And that is true. I'll give you an example. The little town where I'm from, 2 churches, one Baptist by white people, one Baptist for black people. And to this very day, in the year 2021, these have never integrated. They have never attended each other's services right till today. And so the Jehovah's Witnesses, they do. Now, with all of that having been said, one of the things that witnesses do is they oftentimes overplay it. And that's the sad part. You see, Jehovah's Witnesses do not like to discuss discrimination, racial inequality. They do not like to discuss it. And it kind of falls literally along 2 lines, along the lines of white Jehovah's Witnesses and black Jehovah's Witnesses. When I was growing up, and many African-American Jehovah's Witnesses will tell you that if they were to try to talk about how they personally were being impacted by racism, discrimination, many times a white Jehovah's Witness would find that very uncomfortable to discuss. So over a period of time, many African Americans, they actually just held to themselves what they were going through and how they actually felt. You see, during the 60s, the Watchtower took the position that we are not going to have anything to do with the civil rights. So Jehovah's Witnesses during the 60s did absolutely nothing in terms of moving the goalposts along in terms of racial equality. Instead, they stood back and they waited for other groups to go forward and try and get laws changed and get segregation and so forth dealt with by means of laws. And as a result, we know that they had the young men sitting in the Woolworth back in the 60s. They were mistreated, and it started the train that we now see a lot of the civil rights movements resulted in. So it's interesting because the witnesses didn't do anything. And what that means, and I've had this conversation with a number of African-American Jehovah's Witnesses. What that basically means is if it had not been for other people, other groups stepping in and saying, this is wrong, because there were both white groups and black groups that were very much involved in moving the civil rights issues forward. Jehovah's Witnesses would have done nothing, which means if we had to wait for Jehovah's Witnesses as a denomination to help get discrimination and laws and so forth passed, it would have never taken place. In other words, Jehovah's Witnesses today would still be segregated. And the reason why is the witnesses take the attitude of, we have nothing to do with those on the outside, even though many of their African-American members were being affected by what was going on the outside. And that's kind of where you see it at today. In most congregations, you will rarely find an African-American who will carry on a conversation about, something that happened to me on my job with a white witness, because they simply want to just keep it to yourself. Wait for the new world and it will be fixed. Just be patient. Wait for the new world. And so it is a conversation that is rarely, if ever, discussed. And because of my personal background, I had the opportunity to go to the world headquarters of Jehovah's Witnesses. And it's a completely integrated workforce. But as you begin to look around, you begin to see certain patterns. And those patterns are certain types of jobs are held by certain types of races. And if you look all the way to the highest level, for almost 100 plus years, the leadership of Jehovah's Witnesses has always been white. When I was at the headquarters, which is called Bethel, which means house of God, the question I was asked, and we used to ask all the time to other high-ranking African-Americans within the organization, when are we going to get a black governing body? And we will always be told, well, it's not time. It's not time. And the question we used to ask is, well, it's not time for who? Who's having a problem with the timeline? Because we're ready. So it really wasn't that African Americans weren't ready for a black governing body member, but others, the white leadership, they were not ready for it. That's really the bottom line. And the issue that was often presented was, we take something like the country of Mexico. Even to this very day, the country of Mexico and all of Latin America, going all the way down to South America, they are actually responsible for the vast majority of growth within the Jehovah's Witness denomination. I've been told by a number of individuals that if we remove the Hispanic side of the organization out, the Watchtower has absolutely no growth at all. But the Hispanic side is people who are looking for answers. They often find themselves in difficult circumstances. So the message of Jehovah's Witnesses, it appeals to them. And as a result, they become Jehovah's Witnesses in large numbers. And Mexico is considered one of the largest Hispanic branches of the Jehovah's Witnesses. But here's the kicker. And it's very similar to what happened in the Mormon church as well. You have all of these people who are actually supporters, yet the Hispanic community has no representation at the table. The same thing happened when I was in New York at the time with the Asian community. The country of Japan was one of the fastest growing areas of Jehovah's Witnesses in the world. They were literally just setting records, over 180 peaks, which is every month for over 180 months. There was just more Jehovah's Witnesses in every aspect of the religion out of Japan, making the Asian community one of the fastest growing at the time. And once again, no representation at the table. Now, you flashed up a picture just a second ago. Just recently,
is this your current leadership?
This is the current leadership, and I'm
seeing a brother. I'm seeing a
yeah,
brother there.
There's a brother, and unfortunately, when you talk to some African American, they'll tell you, he's a little token guy. So, and it's kind of interesting because the way.
What do you mean? Tell us what you mean by that. For those of us who don't know what that might mean.
Sometimes, and I often tell people, Watchtower is a business. Unfortunately, sometimes corporations and organizations, in order to calm the mass crowd down, they will oftentimes select a person of a certain ethnic color just as simply a representation, but they don't many times wield any power, decision making, and of course they're often handpicked as always, and so they will fit right in real nice with the program. They're not going to raise any issues. That's the bottom line. They'll simply go along to get along. And so, yes, there is an African American who now serves on the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses after almost 140 years of people serving in leadership roles. Took a lot, as they say, a long time coming, long time coming.
Yeah, and what I'm trying to do just really quickly to kind of contrast that is I'm just going to pull up the Mormon Church's leadership, because there's often kind of this kind of Olympics of who's got it better, who's got it worse. And this is our leadership, right? It's white. There's one exception. We've got Suarez, which I guess he's from Brazil.
Okay.
Is that right, Gerardo?
Yes, Brazil.
And Garrett Gong, who I guess is of Asian origin.
Okay.
But he's certainly not a native Asian, right? He's
Yeah.
I think he went to Oxford. I'm very sure he was raised in the States. But anyway.
Well, something that stood out to me, now that you're talking who has the best, who has the worst, the Jehovah's Witnesses were not pro civil rights.
Oh no.
We were fighting against it in the name of God. We have apostles, which Mormons believe they're called of God as a mouthpieces of God, saying that the civil rights movements were from Satan.
What's most interesting about these types of groups is oftentimes who are considered the most loyal,
right,
most supportive, most obedient. And I will be very honest with you. In the African American community, Jehovah's Witnesses who I have seen over the years, the African American Jehovah's Witness, he will do anything he is told. He will not question. He will not challenge. When I served as an elder, that was one of the things I would often see is white elders. They would often question and challenge. Well, where did you get that information from, brother? I've never heard of that. Could you get a reference for that? Is there anything in writing or in print where that information is found, or is that simply your personal thoughts on the matter? And you contrast that to the African American brothers, they would be like, I ain't saying nothing. No, brother, just keep your head low, keep your head low. You know, they wouldn't say anything. They would never do that. And so yet they are the most loyal. In fact, we was laughing and talking about it, that sometimes in the African American community, the black witness is harder on another black witness than even in the white community. We're going to give you just a couple examples. You want to share an example of someone who was actually working at the White House?
Oh, yeah. So we had this sister in our congregation when we first moved to Alexandria, Virginia, and she was telling me about her story about during the time of the Nixon, when he was president, and the Watergate scandal, and she was working at the White House at the time. And so she wanted to quit her job because she felt like, you know, she was really one of those people that just thought that, you know, she was going to get called into court. I don't know why she thought that, but anyway, she didn't want to be, you know, brought into court and have to, you know, be a Jehovah's Witness and having to go against the president or whatever. I don't even know why she thought that. But so she went to the elders and she told the elders that she was going to think about quitting her job because, you know, she didn't want to get caught up in the scandal, and maybe somebody would be questioning her, wanting her to go to court and so forth. And you shouldn't be taking your brothers to, not your brothers to court, but you shouldn't be going to court at all, you know. So the brothers told her, they said, well, look, sister, you know, when are you going to be retiring? And she said she had like about 6 months to go, not that long to go. And so they told her, they said, do not quit your job. They said, go ahead and get your benefits and go ahead and retire. And, you know, don't quit the job. So she got good advice. You know, she was able to retire, and that was in the 70s. And, you know, we moved to Alexandria back in the mid 80s, late 80s, you know, so she was able to keep her job, where other people that we knew, this other brother that was getting ready to get appointed to be an elder, and they wanted to know whether or not there was anything that would be keeping him from, you know, getting, becoming an elder. And he was encouraged to quit his job because he went to the brothers and said that the company that he had been working for was making a part that goes to a warship, which was just totally insane. Because I think it also did, like, they did automobiles.
They did everything. They did everything.
But he got bad advice.
Yeah. Sometimes you would find that the African American brothers, they would you not only do you have the rules of the organization, but then they would even tighten the rules down. So if the organization said jump 3 feet, the African American brothers now said we really need to jump 4 feet. And so you would see this, and as a result, the advice that is often given is very devastating. I'll give you another example. Like, for example, like we talked about going to school. There was when I was in Brooklyn, many of us, we didn't go to college. We turned down scholarships. We were advised this wouldn't be a good thing to do, and if you gave it up, then you're making a good spiritual decision. And this impacted a lot of African American brothers because they oftentimes had opportunities. And many of the people I know, and there are people who are watching this program right now, when they was 17, 18 years old, they was ready for a scholarship. It was already in line, but because of the way the organization is. And so oftentimes the white brothers would often tell their kids, yeah, I want you to go to school. I want you to go to school. And I actually saw how that impacted people when you got to the corporate office in New York. Many of the guys that we were sitting around one day and we were discussing what we did before we came to New York, and people had like most witnesses, a little part-time business. I had a little cleaning business, a little yard service business, you know, the pool service business. And I remember one of the guys sitting there, white guy from Dallas, Texas. I'll never forget it. So we asked him, so what did you do before you came? And he said, I worked for Dean Witter. And I'm thinking, and we was all sitting around, we were looking at each other like, Dean Witter? Mailroom, right? And he said, no, I worked in acquisitions and I dealt with derivatives. And we was like, oh. And then he began to tell us that his congregation, the brothers, they were white, well-educated. His father was an elder, and he had him go to Texas A&M. And so when he got to New York, he had the type of background where he was able to rise within the organization. And we told him, man, you're not going to be over here working with us long. And sure enough, after he made his first year, he came in one morning. He says, guys, this is my last week. I'm getting a job transfer. And he said, well, where are you going to? He said, I'll be moving down to the Treasury Department. And what he does in the Treasury Department, and he's still there, what he does is when Jehovah's Witnesses die and they leave and they will things to the Watchtower Society, it is his responsibility to cash out all bonds and stocks, any real estate holdings. He will have those converted over into cash, and everything goes into the coffers. So he's doing exactly what he went to college to do. He's working in the financial end of the Watchtower. And so you see the different lifestyles, and you see the different ways that the races are impacted by the way which they are taught by this religion. And we've had this conversation before with a lot of former Jehovah's Witnesses who are African Americans, and they often mention, that was one of the things, man, we really couldn't talk about in the congregation how I was treated on my job, and it wasn't because I was a Jehovah's Witness. See, every time you have run into problems, it's not because you're a Jehovah's Witness. Sometimes it's simply the way you look. Sometimes the way your skin color looks. But when you can't even talk about it because it's always played, downplayed. And as a result, many African Americans, they simply just hold it inside. And until you have a private conversation, you would never know what they had went through because they can't tell anybody.
Yeah, because when I was pioneering and I was trying to get a part-time job, and there was another sister, and she was Caucasian, and she was able to go downtown. It was a small town that we were in, and she was able to get a job. And the brothers were like, well, sister so-and-so went down there and got a job. Why can't you? But they don't understand that, they already made their quota for that office. Yeah. And so you don't always get to get the same jobs. And so a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses think that when you are a witness, no matter what your color is, everyone hates you because you're a witness. And that's not always the case. No. And I always tell people that, hey, look, people are people, and then they join a group or an organization. And basically what I mean by that is people grow up in different areas of the country. They got different cultures. They live in different communities. And then you go knocking on doors, and these people come into the congregation, and they bring their racist views or their attitudes with them when they come in. And just because they become a Jehovah's Witness doesn't mean that they change how they view people of other races. Now, I can say this, I'm very, very fortunate. I was raised around mostly Caucasians because my dad was in the Air Force, and we lived in some of the most remotest places in the United States. And so there were no African Americans that lived there. But I am so grateful that the Caucasians that I was around, I didn't really see the racism. I don't know if it's because I was a little kid and I wasn't paying attention to all of that, but I just felt like, I felt comfortable being around the Jehovah's Witnesses. So I'm trying to say something positive, about that. But then on the other hand, as I got older and I saw, how the brothers would treat, other brothers that needed jobs that were African-American. And when I was in my teenage years and things like that, I noticed that there were brothers that were self-employed. And most of the Caucasian brothers in a lot of the congregations that I attended were always self-employed. But I also noticed that when there were African Americans that didn't have work and they were out of work, they weren't always so freely to give them a job. And another thing I noticed is that when JT left Bethel and came down to Maryland, where I was serving with my pioneer partners, and we were getting ready to, start our life outside of Bethel, because when we didn't get accepted into Bethel, thank God, I noticed that the brothers would not, like the elders and things like that, didn't offer JT a place to stay. They put him with a sister in the congregation and her unbelieving husband. And so here he is coming down from Bethel, the house of God, so to speak, but none of the elders, we got like 5 or 6 elders in the congregation, and they put him with a sister and her unbelieving husband. Didn't feel comfortable opening up their home to JT. But I mean, those are just the subtle things, You know, it's the subtle things.
Yeah,
that you say.
and that's why I was saying, as a religion, they have done a much better job at dealing with race than many other denominations. I mean, some denominations have not changed since they were formed. So, but then on the other hand, there's also this let's keep things quiet. Just to give you an example, you may have seen Jehovah's Witnesses with the carts, and there are basically two types of carts. There's a cart that basically any Jehovah's Witness can be in charge of on the streets. But there's also one that's called metropolitan witnessing. For example, there's certain locations that the people who are actually manning the carts, they're specifically selected. Here in Washington, D.C., take a place like at Union Station. That may be shared with different congregations. So if a witness wants to be able to stand out there, he actually has to submit an application to his body of elders. That's right. He has to submit his application to his body of elders, letting them know, I would like to be able to stand out there, not talk to anybody, and just man the cart. Now, on this form, which is really interesting. I mean, when someone sentenced me, I'm like, man, this is sad. This is really sad. One of the questions is, does this individual have racial problems? And I'm thinking to myself, how in the world, if you've ever been involved in a company with the creation of forms, where people sit around the conference room table and everybody put their ideas together to come up with how many questions are going to be on the form, and then everybody, you vet each question out, and then you decide, okay, we got 30 good questions, we need to get it down to just 10. How in God's green earth does a religion that calls itself the church, the faith of God himself, how in the world do you end up having the need to put one of the questions on the form? Is this guy a racist or not? Do we want him being able to stand there with the card? If he's a racist, we'll say no. Can you imagine this now? The elders are going to have to say, no, we think he's a racist. So the critical thinking question is, if you already know this man's a racist, why haven't you addressed this with this man? This shouldn't even be an issue. How does a person that all the elders sit in the back room on the form and says, does he have a problem with people of different color? Yes. Mm-hmm. Why have they not addressed that? Mm-hmm. And to think that out of all the questions, asking is the person a racist on a form for a person who now is supposed to stand on the street with the word of God. How do you have something like that in your religion? And so the issue of race is there. People know it's there, but once again, we would try to tap it down.
Mm-hmm. That's helpful. Gerardo, you just shared with me some statistics that I think are really interesting. Should I read them really quick? Do you want to read them?
You can read them. Yeah.
Yeah. So the Pew Foundation says that Jehovah's Witnesses, 36% white, 32% Hispanic, 27% black, and then 6 are of another race or mixed race. That's quite balanced, actually, in terms of membership. But it's just kind of shocking. So that on the one hand, that's great. On the other hand, it's shocking to see then how unrepresentative your top leadership are.
Yes.
You know? Yeah. And yeah, those are all important stories. Well, is there anything else you want to say about, are there doctrines, theological or doctrinal issues that are still taught in the church today about race, or have they denounced past racist teachings? You know, is there anything about the doctrine of theology and race?
They have moved away from that. They refer to that as old light now. Now we have a better understanding. Now we have new light. Yeah. So those types of teachings that they had in the beginning, man, they moved those to the side. But unfortunately, sometimes underneath the surface, you may find sometimes the same attitude.
Do you know around what year they started changing their doctrines regarding race? What about mixed race marriages?
Yeah, there are interracial marriages. You will find that in this organization. You will find interracial marriages.
Was it a thing that was not okay before? And
remember there was a situation where we had a special pioneer in our congregation, and his brother was engaged to a African American, and they were trying to get into the circuit work, but they didn't want them to go into the circuit work. And the circuit work is a traveling overseer in the Jehovah's Witnesses. And what it was is they didn't want to put the mixed race couple out into the traveling work. I don't know when that was. I know I know we were in their congregation, in the early 80s.
And that's pretty much still a policy now. Many times they feel that the congregations are not ready for an interracial traveling overseer. And there, as far as I know, there are no, especially in the United States, there are no interracial traveling overseers.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I think our leaders must be talking to each other. I bet there's some club of like leaders of high demand religions, because you may have saw Gerardo and I smiling, when you said that instead of apologizing, hey, we got it wrong in the past, we're sorry for those bad teachings, now we're going to correct it. That's what reasonable people do when they make a mistake and want to correct it. But the words you used of like just de-emphasizing the past, moving in a new direction.
We saw through a glass darkly.
Yeah, just saying, oh, we got more clarification now, right? Like it must be that our leaders are talking.
They use such words as an amplification. We see clearly now. And their favorite for Jehovah's Witnesses is new light. New light from God. So it's like he gave you dark light on the other side. Okay. We got it. But
does your church ever apologize? Has it ever apologized for anything that you're aware of?
Let me tell you what they do. Not only do they not apologize, they will often blame the members. Just a quick example. When the Watchtower was predicting the end of the world and they were setting dates, they learned better to set dates. They actually, after the date came and passed, they actually blamed the members. Y'all were reading too much into what we said. Y'all took it too seriously. And so they actually blame the members. And that's a very common practice that they do in this organization. They will often actually blame the members for believing what they themselves were teaching. It's ridiculous, but that's what makes it a high control group. That's how you identify a cult, because of the lack of humility to admit that you're wrong. Yet as members, as individual members, they beat you as a Jehovah's Witness that you need to come forward and admit that you've done something wrong. Yet from the leadership aspect, no.
So you're saying there's a double standard of what they teach members to do regarding what repentance is, but an unwillingness to follow the steps of repentance themselves.
Oh, absolutely. They have never asked that you forgive us. For example, think of all the teachings that people followed on blood, on transplants, and so many, and alternative service, going to prison. They did not come out and say, brothers, we are so sorry. We're so sorry. For those of you who lost family members, on the information that we gave you, we thought it was the best information that God wanted you to have, and we apologize for those. Man, they will never do that. And the reason why, because the legal department will tell them, man, we can't go out in public and say that kind of stuff. It's going to cost us a lot of money, and they will never say it. Yet, if you read some of their magazines now, and we often laugh about this, the Watchtower can write some of the best written articles you can ever read. They just don't do it themselves. That's all.
Too much liability, though. I mean, you think they got 200 lawyers in Bethel now? They probably have to have 5,000 if they came clean.
And so that's kind of the problem. You read the articles they write; they're very good on, forgiving, saying you're sorry. Should you be too proud to admit you was wrong? And yet they would never actually practice that themselves. No, not the upper leadership. No.
Is that sounding familiar, Gerardo?
Yes.
You heard it before.
100%.
Yeah. Okay, JT and Lady Cee, the internet is upon us. Google and YouTube and podcasts, and it's taken. Religions are going down. They are on the ropes. The rise of the nuns is the movement that the Pew Foundation has been talking about for a decade or more, where people who are unaffiliated with religions are rising. It's the largest and the fastest growing church religious group in the United States, and almost every religion's taken it in the pants and is losing membership, and in some cases hemorrhaging. And in the Mormon Church's case, it's hemorrhaging. What is the status in 2021 of the growth or the decline of active membership within the Jehovah's Witness movement in the United States and globally. What can you tell us about the numbers?
The numbers are really shocking when you consider all of the numbers. You mentioned, the point was mentioned earlier that he had the opportunity to attend the memorial, the passing of the bread and wine.
Mm-hmm.
That is actually a very interesting number for those who attend. Last year, they're roughly referred to as 8 million active Jehovah's Witnesses. These are people who are actually knocking on doors.
In the world.
They have to report. Yeah, they have to report every month that they're knocking on doors. So it's about 8 million. When you attend the memorial, which is the passing of the bread and wine, the numbers is over 20 million people. 20 million people. Now, the witness will use, as we often laugh, numbers, you can't, numbers are, you can't lie, you can lie with numbers. You always can lie with numbers. But numbers themselves don't lie. Now, if you look at the 20 million, you would say, man, y'all have a tremendous attendance and people who are interested in your religion, because you got 8 million knocking on doors and you got 20 million attending this particular service. But when you start digging down into who is actually making up this 20 million, what you will find is these are just simply old, tired, worn out Jehovah's Witnesses dragging back to that one meeting a year. And see, we used to laugh at other churches because we would say, look at them. At Christmas, the parking lot is full. At Easter, the parking lot is full. Throughout the week, regular months, they don't have nobody going to their churches. Now Jehovah's Witnesses are struggling with the same thing. The parking lots are empty. And this is even before COVID. And now they have one meeting a year where people will beg their family. Parents will beg their children, baby, you coming to the memorial this year? Yeah, mama, I'll be there. I'll be there. So, and they come, and it makes this number swell. But as the Pew report that you quoted earlier from, that is a very interesting statistics because it shows that Jehovah's Witnesses have what is known as one of the largest churn rates of any denomination. And what that means is for every person who is coming in through the front door, you have just as many falling out the back door. Yeah. And Jehovah's Witness kids, according to the Pew Research Foundation that you quoted earlier, they make the point that Jehovah's Witnesses, they have the largest percentage of young people who leave the church. And that's absolutely true. Mm-hmm. You will find witnesses have 3 or 4 kids, and then you go back years later when all their kids are 24, 20, they're gone. They're gone. Mom and dad, they might still be dragging to the Kingdom Hall, but the kids, they're gone. And that's the problem that this organization is having, trying to get enough young blood in. And it is a serious problem because, as we mentioned before, this is a very male-dominated religion. One of the things that they lack are, quote unquote, qualified men for positions in the church. A lot of young people want nothing to do with that. When I was coming along 13, 14, 15 years old, me and my buddies, on Saturday, we grab our lawnmowers, go down to the Kingdom Hall, cut the grass, trim the hedges. Today, they can't get young people in Jehovah's Witnesses to do any of that. In fact, it has got so bad that they have now actually had to start using females to do things that men have always done in this religion because there's simply not enough young men who are interested. And so the decline, one of the things that concerns this organization more than anything else is they would literally prefer to have 300 diehard Jehovah's Witnesses, 300 diehard, than they have 1,000 people who are just slack, they're just under the radar because this organization is about production, doing things. And so that's what they're finding now. And so a lot of people in this organization, they're just skimming by just to get by. And that does not work well for a high control group because that means the members at the end of the day, they're not paying any attention to what the leaders are saying.
Yeah. And this is interesting to me. So I was always stunned as a Mormon missionary when I learned that you have to wait like a year to join the church, Jehovah's Witness church. We wanted to baptize people within a couple of weeks, if not on the same day. You guys made people really earn it, right? And I thought there was a wisdom in that because, man, once you joined, you had really earned it. You're probably going to be more likely to stay and stay committed to it. So I'm really surprised to learn that you guys are bigger than us. Gerardo, did you know that there are more Jehovah's Witnesses than Mormons?
Well, the 20 million the 20 million number that JT is talking about is just on this one meeting a year, which I don't know how it's in other parts of the world, but at least in Mexico City, it's almost like this huge campaign to get as many people, members, non-members, a lot of investigators to go to this one meeting. So that's a 20 million number. The 8 million number, I knew about that, active Jehovah Witnesses. So I do think they're bigger than Mormonism, because Mormonism doesn't have that high of a
No, it's way bigger.
rate.
If the church today said everybody go to a meeting, I think the most it would get would be 4 million.
Yeah.
The Mormon Church boasts 16 million,
Yeah.
but we know a full third of those are just lost people that don't identify as Mormon anymore. It's just
Or more than
Yeah.
a third, bro.
but probably
Oh,
half.
And
probably half.
that's the way it is for the memorial. So
Yeah.
many of the people, and you just, I remember as an elder, one of the things that the elders were told to do during the memorial, look around and see people who you haven't seen in 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 months, and make sure that you get with them to try to get back into their homes and what we call reactivate them, because there's just so many people, they they identify as witnesses, but they have nothing to do with them. And so it doesn't really represent that these are all new people who are just so excited about our organization and our religion that they've come to the memorial. These are just old, tired, worn out Jehovah's Witnesses dragging to the meeting. And like you mentioned, there's a concerted effort the weeks leading up to the memorial. Every effort is made by everybody. Call all your sons, call all your daughters, your cousins, call everybody. So it's really this big push. But then 3 or 4 weeks after, the number just goes right back down. And it's been that way ever since I've ever been involved with Jehovah's from a kid. Big meeting turnout. In 3 or 4 weeks, Kingdom Hall is back to normal. Back to normal.
Yeah. So you guys are you're definitely bigger than we are, which I did not understand. We would say we've got maybe 4 million active people who are really attending and contributing and who self-identify.
Yeah.
And then if you rate the activity rate, how they do it, of like people are actually going out and preaching every week or every month, like our numbers would go really, really low.
Yeah.
And see, Jehovah's now this is the thing that people don't understand sometimes. The reason Jehovah's Witnesses are knocking on your door is because it is a requirement. Now, they play it 2 ways. Witnesses will say, we have 8 million volunteers knocking on doors. Okay. And so most people in their mind, they understand what a volunteer is. A volunteer is a person who goes down to the soup kitchen and he helps out when he wants to. He helps out as long as he can. But more importantly, when he tells the soup kitchen people, I'm not going to be able to be down here this week, or I won't be able to do this anymore, what do they always say? Thank you, man, for helping us out, man. We appreciate you volunteering, giving us a hand. That is not what happens when a Jehovah's Witness says he ain't going to knock on doors. And so in the public, they tell people that all these people you see, they're volunteers. But at the meetings, if you come to the meetings, especially when the circuit overseer is there, he will tell you, this is a requirement of God that you go out there and knock on these doors. But
don't you need to fulfill certain amount of hours?
Oh yeah, that's exactly
to
right.
Get baptized.
When I came in and my wife came in, you were required to knock on doors for at least 10 hours, to come up with 10 hours of preaching
a week,
each month.
Okay.
Each month.
And I was a secretary in the congregation. One of the responsibilities I had was I used to tabulate the time. Every month, a Jehovah's Witness has to fill out a time sheet every month. Put his name up there, how many hours, how many books, how many magazines, how many times he went back to people's home to follow up. All goes on this form. It's put into a little box, and someone like myself, the secretary, we collect all these little time sheets up. I used to spread them on the kitchen table, take a calculator and add them all up. And then I would put it onto a master form. And that form is the one I would send to New York. And they would get these forms from all 100,000 congregations of Jehovah's Witnesses. And the record, we kept a record of every single person's time. Every single person. It was just like on your job. In fact, that is how you were evaluated. Any position within the church would be based on that card. So I had a box with everybody's card in the box, and I would transfer their hours to the card. And this is what the elders would look at. Let's see how Sister Johnson is doing. I noticed she's kind of low. Her hours are low. And this is how Jehovah's Witnesses measure people's spirituality. If Sister Davis has 80 hours, oh, she's spiritual. She loves God. She loves God. Other people, they would say, they're a single-digit publisher. They're giving token service. And so this is one of the things that Jehovah's Witnesses don't tell people. People often ask, why can't you get a Jehovah's Witness out of your house? They come in your house, they talk all day long. The reason why, they're on the job. They're at work. They're counting time. So they have no problem staying in your house for 2-3 hours because they get to count their time, especially in the wintertime. You get a Jehovah's Witness in the wintertime, he's not leaving. He don't want to be out in the street where it's cold, knocking on doors. I'm in one house on 13th Avenue. I'm staying as long as I can. And every Jehovah's Witness watching this video, they know that's what they do. They know that's what they do. And
that's
so,
especially for the people who have that has those that's pioneering.
oh yeah,
and they got to get so many hours.
oh
in.
my goodness.
And I remember the circuit overseer, he came to our congregation and he had some little formula, and he talked about, I forget what the formula was, it's been so long ago, but the way it worked was you got like 4 weeks off at the end of the year if you did what he said to do. But people don't realize that when you're knocking on doors and you're getting in and out of cars, you're working like rural territory, or you're working in the city and there's no shade and it's really cold, the extremities in weather. His little formula sounds good on paper, but when you put that into reality, it just doesn't pan out, doesn't work. It could be 60 degrees outside. And I remember, going out in field service, and I looked like a fool because it was 60 degrees outside. But when you're working outside and you're constantly being outside without being indoors, you're freezing.
Yeah.
So I had on this great big old down coat and what they call those big boots, and it was like 60 degrees outside, and I had to stop to the store on my way back from going out in field service, and I was thinking to myself how crazy I looked going in there with this garb on because I was freezing being out in field service. But if you're just jumping in your car to go to the grocery store and you just walked out of your house into the car and then into the store, you don't need all that gear on. But when you're going out in field service, it's freezing, and so these are the kind of things that we had to endure, as Jehovah's Witnesses.
Could not complain. Could not complain.
Can I just highlight the absurdity? So one of your listeners, one of our viewers writes, King of Faders writes, why are you guys laughing?
We know King of Faders.
Hey,
Okay.
there, King of Faders.
Good man.
He says less than 10 hours equals, quote, low hour publisher, close quote, and, quote, spiritually weak, close quote, and treated like garbage. Okay. I can imagine if I had a listener that would give me 10 hours a week of volunteer time. I mean, that's Gerardo, basically. No, we pay Gerardo a little bit, but no, we try and pay Gerardo as much as we can. But like 10 hours a week of service is viewed as weak.
No, 10 hours
just 10 hours a month.
Okay, fine. 2 hours, two or 3 hours a week, like, and you're treating them like garbage.
Yeah.
Yes.
And by the way, like, just this idea that in Mormonism, Mormon missionaries pay to be missionaries. That'd be like me going to Microsoft or IBM. Can I pay to sell software for you? And then if I only do 3 hours a week of volunteer time that I pay for, I'm treated like garbage. Like, how did they do this? This is like a Jedi mind trick where it's like
the way they did it. Yeah, the way they did it was very simple. We did a video on counting time. It's on our website. In fact, we had 2 videos that we expand on it. There was 3. Basically, what happened was at one time, Jehovah's Witnesses did not have to turn in time. They didn't have to report. So when the Watchtower said, we want you now to start reporting, a lot of witnesses were like, why should I tell the church how much time I talk to people about God? The church, I'm talking to my neighbor about God. I need to tell you how much time I'm talking to people about God. So what the Watchtower always does, they will put information into their publications. And since these publications are viewed as from God, the witness has to accept it. So they did an article that dealt with counting time. And in this article, they explained to all the witnesses that this is an arrangement of God. You either work with the arrangement and have God's favor, or you don't work with the arrangement and you don't have God's favor. So by elevating, once again, human opinion to divine status, you're able to get people to do things that otherwise they realize is ridiculous. So for any of the Jehovah's Witnesses who were complaining, like, why we got to turn in time? Why we got to do this? That conversation now does not exist, because once again, you would be viewed as the spiritual weak one. And I don't know anyone who follows any religious belief system who wants to be viewed by fellow believers as being the weak one in the crowd. Everybody wants to be spiritually strong. So the Watchtower uses these little definitions to determine what your status would be. And as a witness, you do everything in your power not to fall into these various categories. That's what you do.
But you know what else really, that when I'm thinking about this whole thing about the counting of time, and they don't have book studies that they had when we were there. But that book study arrangement was a small group of people. And that's really how they censored each other, because when you go to that book study, it's only like 15, 20 people in that group. And so you're supposed to be meeting on Saturdays with your group. And that was a good way for people to gauge what you were doing as well, and being able to censor you and say, oh, you didn't go out in service. And then, of course, people like to gossip. And so when people come to the Kingdom Hall, they're like, you know, this sister, she's in my book study and I ain't seen her in 6 months, or I ain't seen her. So people know, so they like know, even though JT did the time, it was almost like those little small groups kind of showed you out, because at the Kingdom Hall, you couldn't really tell, you know, because there's more people that's there at the Sunday meeting and stuff. But in those small groups, they could tell who was going out and who wasn't showing up.
Yeah. The Watchtower has a system. Many people today, you often heard, I belong to a mega church. I belong to a mega church. Jehovah's Witnesses have no interest in creating mega church. They do not have any interest in creating a mega church. Why? Because you cannot control that many people. And that is why in the Jehovah's Witness religion, once a congregation grows to a certain size, they do what's called a split. So if you have 200, 145, 150, 160, when you reach about 200, the congregation will often split. You have a north congregation and a south congregation. And here's the reason why. In a typical congregation, you have 5 elders. And the reason why, because there are 5 main elder positions in the congregation. So when you have a congregation that consists of 125 members, that means that each elder is responsible for about 25 people, making sure that those 25 people are at the Kingdom Hall, making sure those 25 people are out knocking on doors. And a quote unquote good elder, someone in that 25 group, and that's why we call them book studies, is missing. When you get home as a good elder, you would call that person up. So Johnson, how you doing? When we didn't see you at the Kingdom Hall today, everything okay? And so this constant on you. It's like working on a job, man. Everybody knows when the boss just walks through the plant, everybody, hey, how you doing? But to have him just stand there all day, like, I'm gonna watch and see what y'all do all day. You know what kind of pressure that puts people on. Well, that's basically the way it works in this organization. So by keeping the congregation small, no mega church, keep it small, we can manage these people better. And that's what they do.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard of Dunbar's number before, JT?
No, what? No.
All right. So Dunbar's number is a suggested cognitive limit to the number of people with whom one can maintain stable social relationships.
Oh, wow.
Relationships in which an individual knows who each person is and how each person relates to every other person. This number was first proposed in the 1990s by British anthropologist Robin Dunbar, who found a correlation between primate brain size and average social group size. By using the average human brain size and extrapolating from the results of primates, he proposed that humans can comfortably maintain 150 stable relationships.
Yeah.
So that's Dunbar's number. They're basically, as soon as it gets too big, the human brain can't and by the way, Mormons do the same thing. It's this idea, our congregations are called wards, and a ward gets split as soon as it grows too big. Now, there aren't many Mormon wards splitting these days because the church is hemorrhaging.
Well,
go ahead, Gerardo.
Sorry
Gerardo?
to interrupt, but my dad was a state. I was talking to my dad. My dad was a state counselor for many, many years, like over 9 years. So he knows a lot about this, like splitting words and congregations. Something that I was talking to him was that now in Mexico, right now, the Mormon church strategy is to start joining those congregations again because they're losing so many members.
Do you mean merging?
Yeah, merging them.
Merging smaller units into bigger units.
What he said was interesting, that he thought that by splitting them, they made the congregations weaker.
Yeah.
And then so people started leaving more and more. You bring investigators in, and then it doesn't look like a huge congregation. It looks like just very few people. So now the strategy is going to be larger, bigger words, at least in Mexico.
So the church is collapsing units to try and make the average unit size bigger.
Way bigger than it has ever been before.
That is exactly what Jehovah's Witnesses are doing right now as we are speaking. They are taking a congregation. You may have 4 or 5 congregations in a city. They're combining them down to 2. And what that does, it gives the appearance, like you said, that the Kingdom Hall is full.
Yeah.
When reality, you simply just combine 2 empty Kingdom Halls to make a whole.
I swear, someone in the world,
they're talking to each other, man. They're talking to each other.
Somewhere in the world, there's like a resort that's like private. It's like Jeffrey Epstein's Island. It's this resort. And the leaders of the Scientologists, Jehovah's Witnesses, the Mormons, they're all get together. And it's like, okay, how do we promote religious freedom? How do we maintain our tax-exempt status? How do we, how do we manage our membership now that our churches are hemorrhaging? How do we dominate the internet so that we can control search engine optimization? How do we deal with YouTubers and podcasters? How do we malign them and blacklist them and smear them so that our critics can't ever have power over us? And how do we do missionary work in the modern age? I swear they're all collaborating. They're all colluding because they're all doing.
It seems like that. It really does.
How do we do marketing?
Really
How do we do marketing so that we can sell our message in the digital age? I swear they're collaborating. They have to be.
It really would make you come to that conclusion. No question about it.
I remember when Jehovah's Witnesses were just starting out, and they were talking about how when the congregations were growing, how this was Jehovah's way of showing how he's speeding up this work, and soon Armageddon's going to be here. So it was like maybe a couple years ago, maybe like last year. Man. So JT's mom was talking to somebody in her area, and his mother don't go to the Kingdom Hall no more. But the sister said, "Oh yeah, they're consolidating Kingdom Halls, and they had made them have to drive way on the other side of town in this rural community to go to the Kingdom Hall." And so the sister said, Jehovah's speeding up the work because that's what the brothers were telling them, that the end is so close. That's why they're expanding. That's why they're now consolidating these Kingdom Halls. It's like, oh God, people will believe anything,
Yeah, it's crazy. Okay, so this takes us to our next big question.
Okay.
We're going to switch to a new big topic.
All right.
Tell me how much time you guys have tonight. Do you guys have another hour and a half?
We
can.
Yeah.
Okay.
Keep it going.
Okay. Next question.
If you see me pass out, you say, I think it's enough, y'all. Okay.
So the Mormon church is hemorrhaging right now. We're losing somewhere between 50 and 80% of the people raised Mormon in the United States. So imagine their 6th generation pioneer ancestry, couple hundred years, they're descendants of early church leaders. Between 50 and 80% of them have left the church by the time they're 20 to 30 years old. Massive hemorrhaging. The church is in free fall. It's in collapse. You guys say that you're starting to see a decline as well. Can you list for us? The reasons why Mormons are leaving. It's they're learning about the church's history. They're finding out all the shady, dark stuff that they didn't know before. But there's also racism. There's also sexism, patriarchy. There's homophobia and LGBT stuff. There's LGBT suicides. And then there's just, it's boring and it's irrelevant, and the message isn't selling. We are gaining membership in Africa. It's almost like the church is like, where can we find the poorest, most desperate people? We'll send all the missionaries there. You know, we're collapsing in Western Europe. Yeah. We're collapsing in developed Asia, in Japan. We're collapsing in the United States and Canada.
Mexico.
In Mexico, we're collapsing. Latin America seems to have kind of gotten our number. But in Africa, we're growing. Okay, so that's just kind of setting the stage of what's happening with us. Mm-hmm. What's happening with you guys? Is there a hemorrhaging? And if people are leaving, what are the main causes of people leaving Jehovah's Witness movement?
Everything you just said.
Yeah.
And somebody said, the internet is where bad religions go to die. Is that what they So, you know, for many years, you know, me being raised in this religion, you know, I knew that I was not supposed to go get any spiritual food anywhere else but the Watchtower. And I know, as a, you know, personally, my own personal experience with the name Jehovah, and how, you know, when I was growing up, they're like, oh, Jehovah's name is in the encyclopedia, because I used to make this thing about Jehovah's name all the time. Oh, look in the dictionary, Jehovah's name in the dictionary. Look in the encyclopedia, name's there. So of course, when I got my first computer, you know what I did? Search engine, looked up Jehovah, and did not realize they had a growing number of people on the internet that were complaining about this religion, how if they would have known the information that they knew, how they would have never joined this religion, just all the just misleading teachings, you know, the lies that they told us. And just like, you know, like we had talked in our last interview with you, you talked about how the Mormons at least let you go to college.
Yeah.
But we couldn't go to college. So now I'm going to throw another one in there for a lot of us that's leaving or that have left. The issue is, you have lived a lifetime and you look back and you have nothing to show for it. You know, in our activism, we get emails from people all the time telling us that they're living on a meager Social Security, and some people don't even have that. Somebody even emailed us and told us that there was a brother that used to be at Bethel, and when he got kicked out, when they kicked all those people out, he's now at a soup kitchen trying to get food. And so Jehovah's Witnesses do not talk about this at the Kingdom Hall. They try to make it look like everything is fine and dandy, when there's a lot of people out here that's just struggling to make ends meet. And then you think about people who don't have Social Security in these other countries. So Jehovah's Witnesses, you know, a lot of people were like contemplating suicide. Yeah. We had this one young man, I don't know where he is right now, but his story just touched my heart when he emailed me and told me that he had already planned his funeral. He bought his suit, he made his funeral arrangements, bought a shotgun, and then he decided to take one last ditch effort to go on the internet to do a little bit of research. And he came across our channel and he said, we saved his life, because the information that we had on our channel showed him that he was not going crazy, and he wasn't alone. And and the fact that he didn't think this religion was anything that he wanted to be part of, you know, he thought that it was going crazy. He thought that he had kind of failed God in some kind of way. And so, but when he was able to find our channel and find out that he was not going crazy, then that kind of like helped him out. And he said that he was, the sad thing about him was I think he was disfellowship. And his mother and stepfather were living in his house. And here they are, he's taking care of them, and they're walking around trying to halfway shun him in his own house. And so he said he couldn't do that anymore. And so a lot of people, you know, thank God, you know, a lot of people are finding the truth on the internet and they're not committing suicide. But we can't tell you the number of people that we find out after the fact that they couldn't take it no more and they took their lives. So it's pretty bad out here.
Yeah, the internet is a game changer. And we always tell people on our channel that, because one of the things that makes high control groups so effective is the ability to control access to information. Jehovah's Witnesses taught you never look up any reference material unless it agrees with the Watchtower publication. You can look up anything you want to, but if it don't agree with what the Watchtower says on verse 13, then you throw it away. So for the typical Jehovah's Witness, they don't look up anything. The internet allows people who have issues and concerns, legitimate issues and concerns that they want to talk about. But you can't. You cannot bring these types of issues up, because if you do, you're only gonna be able to do it a couple times. You go to the brothers once, and they're gonna say, "Okay, well, let's look at this." And after a while, we done told you what the answer is now. And so at that point, your relationship with God and everything becomes in question.
What does the Jehovah's Witness leader say when you're like, wait a minute, what about these problems I'm finding on the internet? What is the typical type of leader answer that they give?
It's a very simple answer. The witnesses, they're black and white, man. They black and white. They ain't nothing technical. And this is one of the things that we did. We went to college and we took some psychology class. First classes we took when we went back, because we wanted to understand, how do people get involved in high control groups and cults? How do people who normally they make good decisions in their life, they sound reasonable to you, and yet they get tired of a group like this? Well, in psychology, they explain to us how correlation works, how causations, and they explain to us how you can literally be led down a path. A good lawyer gives what? Leading questions. That's why the judge always got to stop him, and the other attorney got to stop him, because they know if we let him loose with them questions, he's going to take him right down the road. That's what the Watchtower does. They have leading questions. And so one of the things that we found is that the use of words becomes powerful in the religion. Jehovah's Witnesses are taught this, man. If someone comes to you, if someone approaches you, steps to you and says, I found this on the internet, the witness knows I'm supposed to reject it. Yeah. Now, how is that for a stopper? You can't even get started. The minute you open your mouth and you say, I got this from the internet, the conversation stops. How can you make progress? Now, let me just tell you how bad it is. I'm going to tell you just how bad it is. The information is from their own publications.
Right.
But
that's why I used to have the books.
That's right.
Even when you use JT, what do you mean, JT? And then Gerardo, I want to hear your response. What do you mean? It's from their own books.
If you come to a Jehovah's Witness and you say this is something that was written in the magazines and it's more than 2 days old, because their religion, their doctors are like milk, man. They spoil in a couple of weeks. If you come to them with anything that's old, they don't want to look at it. And this is what we were taught. As an elder, I used to stand there on the platform all the time. Brothers, we're not interested in old information. We want the new information that Jehovah has for us. So every witness knows if anybody steps to them, that's why we tell people all the time, do not try to send your family 300 pages of 1929 Watchtowers. Do not do that.
Now, just to be clear, for those who don't know and didn't listen to the last episode, what you're saying is there's all sorts of doctrine and theology and prophecy that was made 10, 20, 30, 50, 80 years ago that would demonstrably show that the church was getting it wrong, that they've changed, that they've turned around, that they've completely abandoned teachings that were once viewed as fundamental. You're saying you could show a current member those past publications from your own organization that would prove to them the church wasn't true. And they are primed and conditioned to do what when you do that?
To shut down. And that's what we tell people. You need to understand that every Jehovah's Witness has been trained for 10, 20, 30 years as to how do I respond if someone brings me something that is negative about this organization. Every Jehovah's Witness is trained, and we often use the example of the ATM machine. After you punch in 2 or 3 times, what does it do to your card? It takes it. It takes your card. It shuts down. And the same with a Jehovah's Witness. The minute that you step to them, they have been waiting all their life for somebody to say, you know, the society, the Watchtower got this wrong. They know exactly what to do. And this is what often causes people who are leaving to run into all kinds of unnecessary problems with them and their family, because their family now goes silent on them.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things we try to do on our channel is to tell people, look, You have got to take what you know about Jehovah's Witnesses and flip it. You got to flip it. You cannot do a direct approach with a Jehovah's Witness. You will lose every single time. This is the reason why when people who are not witnesses, they will often say, I can never win an argument with a Jehovah's Witness. That's because you're not having an argument. You're not having a conversation. When the witness steps on your door and he asks you what you think the Bible means on this and that, he don't care. He don't care. That is, no, I'm telling you, man, we use that as a talking point. The whole thing about the Jehovah's Witnesses, we understand like a good salesman. You never want the person to say no. You want to keep them talking. As long as a salesman knows, as long as you are talking, the sale is not out yet. And that's the way it is with witnesses. And so if you're trying to explain something about something your church taught about in the Bible, the witness will smile. That's an interesting point. That's an interesting thought. He don't care because he knows that the Watchtower explains it differently. And that's the way we're going.
Now, Gerardo, I'm envisioning you as this young Mormon missionary running through Mexico, collecting Jehovah's Witnesses past manuals and books, trying to show Jehovah's Witnesses that their own church has changed things and has contradicted itself. And what was that like, Gerardo?
I actually did win a few arguments, but yeah, something that the Jehovah Witnesses do really well is their inoculation system, where
that's what we call it, JT and Lady Cee. We call it inoculation.
Okay. They have a very robust inoculation system in which they train their members on how to respond to difficult questions and questions from Christians, from Mormons, from ex-Jehovah Witnesses, and they have books that they literally give and study just about this stuff. One of them is Reasoning Through the Scriptures. Is that what's called?
That's called
where it's just about how to answer difficult questions, and that's something that I've seen the Mormon Church starting to do with, for example, the seminary manuals, where they're starting to mention the gospel topic essays about the difficult issues and start treating them as just if they were normal, and the crazy people are those asking the questions. So what I think is very, very effective for the Jehovah Witnesses is that they have apologetic books, but they're official apologetic books from the Watchtower. It's not like we do in the Mormon Church, some like non-official. Most apologists are non-official, but you have the actual organization responding to these difficult questions and letting the members know ahead of time what those questions are going to be.
So JT and Lady Cee, does that term apologist or apologetics, does that even mean anything to you in your context?
No, not coming out of the Jehovah's Witness background.
Okay,
because you don't have them. Everything comes from the Watchtower.
Exactly. Everything comes from the Watchtower.
What the Mormon Church has historically done is outsourced. It basically creates these nonprofits that are technically separate from the church. And sometimes it uses like professors at our universities, which you guys don't have. But it's basically people to defend the faith and explain why the problems shouldn't be seen as problems.
Yes.
But it's never the core leaders that are doing it historically in the church. It's always been like unofficial people in nonprofits or at universities on the front lines where the leaders never have to actually answer a hard question.
Okay.
Yeah.
They never have to do any of the explaining. And that's what an apologist is in a Mormon context. And apologetics would be these websites where the church is trying to explain why Joseph had 30 wives, why Joseph lied to his wife that he was taking on 29 other women, why Joseph Smith used a peepstone in a hat to translate golden plates. None of this makes sense. Well, it would be apologists that would try and explain that and help its members, the church's members, not leave, or to help people who are investigating the church find reasons to not discount the church. And what I hear you saying is just the church is doing that at corporate headquarters.
The closest thing I can think of that may be to that is for many, many years, all Jehovah's Witnesses were taught, if someone wants to come to you like that, we do not argue with people. We simply say, we're not having this conversation. I'm serious. You won't get this apologetic. That's not going to happen with a good Jehovah's Witness. They will shut the conversation down if they see it's going in the wrong direction. And we were told we do not answer to our enemies. Jesus did not answer to his enemies. And so it became such an issue in this organization that it became necessary for the Watchtower to set up. They literally set up a department at the headquarters because they did not have this department. It is known as the Public Relations Department. So many people around the world were making the argument about Jehovah's Witnesses that it became necessary. We got to get some official statements out. And one of the first individuals was an African-American man. His name was J.R. Brown, one of the smoothest talkers that the Watchtower has ever produced, probably. And this guy, he took over the place of another gentleman who tried to acknowledge that, yeah, we made some mistakes. We did. They took him out of that position. I remember he was married to a Gia. They had a German wife. He used to be in the traveling work. He was actually at the headquarters when I was there. Real nice guy. He was a public relations guy. And he was trying to acknowledge, yes, we did some things. And the Watchtower like, no, we don't admit nothing. And then they stuck J.R. Brown in there. And J.R. Brown was like, well, you see, the Watchtower has oftentimes, and he would talk so slow, you just like, man, hurry up. And he would frustrate reporters because it would take them 20 minutes to say yes or no. And so as a result, they now have a full-blown public relations. You go to their website, they have stuff for the press, everything, and it is good. I mean, you talking about spin? Oh my goodness. They can put some spin. And
you got to remember that people are getting, soft shunned, hard shunned, and everything else for talking about the internet out here now. So and we try to tell people, for people that are listening right now,
yeah,
please don't go toe to toe with your family members because they're not going to listen to you. And we, the experiences that we're getting through our activism is a lot of people that begin to wake up from this religion are doing so because of some life event that has happened. They saw some injustices, different stuff like that. And then it brought them to a wake up moment to say, let me just investigate what I'm in. And so even though you've investigated and you've decided to take that leap and do your homework and your research, doesn't mean that your mother and father, your brother and sister, or anybody that's close to you is willing to do that. And I mean, we get so much correspondence. And recently there was a friend of ours that emailed us, and there was a brother that had been disfellowshipped some 20 years ago. Yeah. So here she's thinking that her good friend, the person that she thinks is her good friend, has forgotten all about this person's disfellowshipping and so forth. And she said the moment that she said she talked to this person on Facebook or whatever it was, however they got in touch with each other, she said her friend shut her down so quick and she's not talking to her anymore. So she just swiftly ended their friendship just because she spoke to this man,
Yeah. Okay. So if you had to list, like off the top of your head, the 5 or 10 top issues that are taking people out, I know that I listed a bunch. I just want to hear you guys say it. What are the biggies that are taking people out?
I would list becoming tired. And the reason why I say that is because the message of Jehovah's Witnesses has for 100 and some years has always been, it's almost here. It's almost here. And when you are teaching people that something is almost here and they're moving into second, third, and fourth generations of witnesses, they're looking back at their grandmama and they're like, they've been telling us this for a long time. And as a result, you don't have the excitement that those individuals had years ago, and they're wearing out. So people getting tired, the changes in the doctrines, and of course the internet. Because
which doctrines are the big ones that have changed?
Probably some of the bigger ones is the teachings about when the world will end. Because all of a sudden you just lost your hope. Like, what? How does that work? And for many people, finding out about the child molestation. The Watchtower has written some of the best articles you want to read about Catholic priests and molestation. But unfortunately, it's not about them. And so when witnesses find out about this, all of a sudden they realize this is wrong.
And remember when we left, we found out that they belonged to the United Nations.
Yeah.
There was a former governing body member, Ray France, when he left the religion and they disfellowshipped him, excommunicated him. They basically, he wrote a book, and then people that ran across that book, they found out the truth about the truth. There were people that had lived a lifetime, found out that they could have went to college, because now Bethel is like under the table kind of thing, asking for people with college degrees to come up to Bethel. So now here you were sacrificing your whole life, and now they're looking for people with degrees, and so here you could have got a scholarship and went to college and you couldn't go. So, different stuff like that. One brother, we know in Ohio, he woke up because he was working on a building committee. He was working on a Kingdom Hall quick build, and he cut himself really bad. And the first thing that they asked him was he going to sue the society? And so he was like, wait, so it's a lot of little things like that too. It's like just little bad things that's happening that people end up in situations like that. Little things, not just necessarily doctrinal, but just behavioral things,
Plus, plus people are seeing, especially people who've been around for a minute, they're seeing the direction that the organization is moving in is exactly the opposite. Let me just give you just a couple examples. Many people when I grew up did not want to become involved in Jehovah's Witnesses because witnesses don't have no choir. Okay. I know people who's like, y'all ain't got no choir. Y'all can't sing. And so people didn't want to become part of a church. They ain't got no choir. And now witnesses can actually do things when they're singing. Like when I was coming on, you would never just sway to the music. Oh, Lord, no. The brothers would pull you in the back. What's wrong with you, brother? You was doing all this moving around and stuff. What's up with that? Now they can do it. At one time, when people who were disfellowshipped were reinstated back, you could not clap that this person had put aside all his sins and came back to God. You had to sit there like, well, we're glad you're back, but we ain't going to clap because you came back. And so now you can actually show emotion. I'm so glad the brother came back. And so it's like, why do you need someone to tell you what kind of emotions you can show to people? And so people are seeing these changes like, this makes no sense.
Right.
And once you start down that rabbit hole, man, you cannot get out. You cannot get out.
But I think the biggest thing that a lot of people don't realize about Jehovah's Witnesses is the fact that when a person becomes a Jehovah's Witness, they are taught that this is the truth.
Yeah.
Okay. So when you had mentioned about the Mormons and the LGBTQ community, Jehovah's Witnesses know that that's no issue. You're not going to be coming to the meetings and rallying around and saying that you're going to be, breaking through the barriers of giving this group a voice. But what people, and that's what I was saying, like the behavioral stuff. So like when people who are Jehovah's Witnesses, who believe this is the truth, and then all of a sudden they're in business with this brother who was supposed to die for him, and then he takes off with all the money in the bank account. This is the kind of stuff they're like waking up and saying, wait a minute, this is not the truth. This can't be the truth. Or maybe that's just a one-off. But to that person, that ain't a one-off. And so that just makes them do more digging and more research. So it's really going to be like I would say the love of the greater number is cooling off for witnesses when they see the look. Because a lot of people complain about there's no love, no real love shown. But Jehovah's Witnesses, they really build up this thing about there's so much love there. And they say, we're the most loving organization in the world. The happiest people in the world. And then people are sitting at the Kingdom Hall and they're thinking, I'm not happy. And the person sitting next to me ain't happy.
Yeah.
And the person in the back, he just fell out the back door, So a lot of that is people are looking at the behaviors of what this religion is saying that all these people are. And then they're finding out they're not the loving group that I thought I joined.
Yeah, it looks like a movie set. If you ever been to Los Angeles to the studios, you'll have a whole town and it looks nice. And then you go around the backside and it's got 2x4s holding up the thing. And that's kind of what a lot of people are seeing in this organization. What they were told
in Russia
out there.
Right.
In Russia, I think that was called a Potemkin town, where they would make the town along the street look beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You just don't go behind the facades because it was all staged.
Yes.
We have a good comment from one of your listeners who's giving their own list. So Southern Boss Lady, she says number 1 is shunning. So is the practice of shunning causing some people to leave the church? Would you guys say, or not, or?
That's what the religion is built on.
Yeah, that's what it's kind of built on. It doesn't cause people to leave as much as it scares people, because they see what happened to Larry. Larry lost his family, friends, cousins, and they're like, I don't want to be like that. And so sometimes that, and that is why over the years, the shunning has become tighter. In fact, now the shunning is expanding beyond baptized Jehovah's Witnesses. It's extending to people who are not even baptized, but they may have been going to the Kingdom Hall for many years.
Oh, wow.
There are people now, the Watchtower is taking the position real simple. You're either with us or you're not. And so we have people who've been calling us up like, my family just called me up and said, are you going to go back to the Kingdom Hall? And I'm like, well, I might go. I need to know right now, because if you're not going, then this is our last conversation. And so these people are not even baptized. And so the organization is cranking down the pressure on people.
I really feel like it's access to information. Yeah. If I really had to say what my number one reason why people are leaving is going to be access to information. And the reason why is because they really sold us on this being the truth. And so even though you see all these bad things happening at the Kingdom Hall and things where people are not showing love and everything, once you get that access to that information and you find out all those loopholes and all the things that they're lying to you about, then people are like, okay, I can leave now.
Yeah.
You know,
my wife and I, we call that getting the confirmation.
Yeah.
Once a person gets the confirmation, you can't go back. It's just hard. It's just so hard, because you realize it's like Santa Claus to the 4-year-old. Once they learn that Santa ain't gonna be flying at the North Pole, when you're 16, 17 years old, you don't want to go sit in the old man's lap. It just don't have the same thrill.
Yeah.
And so that's the way it is for Jehovah's Witnesses. Once they get that confirmation, this is not exactly what they sold me.
Yeah.
And at that point, it's all downhill,
and
out the door.
And like the lady who commented, was it Southern Bras lady?
Yeah.
And then what she said about Armageddon, because you're at the meeting because you want to survive Armageddon, and if you die before Armageddon, then you're looking for that resurrection. So that would be one too. When you find out Armageddon ain't real, that, and then the child abuse. So yeah, she's on point.
So that was her second point, claiming Armageddon is going to kill everyone except the Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yeah.
That's causing people to leave. Why?
It's people, witnesses are beginning to see that they have worked with Mr. Davis on their job for 22 years. And to say that God got to kill this man because he don't believe what's in this pamphlet I got, that don't make any sense. No. Especially when the pamphlet keep getting it wrong. See, the pamphlet was right, then you could work with it, but the pamphlet is wrong. And
so it's almost like what's happening in Mormonism with the LGBT people, where a lot of people are leaving the church because they're seeing humanity on LGBT people and saying it doesn't match with what the church is telling me about this group of people.
Yeah.
In your case, is what the church is telling me about the rest of the world, about everyone who is not Jehovah's Witnesses, does not really match with what I'm seeing about. Like, not everybody deserves to die in Armageddon.
Yes. Because one sister that I know that JT and I met through, she told me, she said, I did not want to be in paradise with all those Jehovah's Witnesses. She said, because they were so mean and nasty. And so she said, if she had to live in the world with them, she'd rather not be there. Because, because it's just, you're with these people shoulder to shoulder, out in service, knocking on doors, trying to bring people into the religion. And then you got these people that are not loving. They don't display the fruit of the spirit and all that kind of stuff. And then you talking about, getting into paradise earth and living forever with these same people.
Yeah. They oversold their product. They just oversold their product. That's all. It's just as simple. And people realize, this is not a Rolls Royce, but it's a Volkswagen. They got a Rolls Royce fender and hood. And so,
Yugo.
They got a Yugo. They got a Yugo.
Okay. And this is great. And so what are the main, like, if the church were to make an enemies list of people or resources or websites or books or whatever that were causing people to leave, like, and you can give names of YouTube channels, of podcasts, of books, of people. Like I actually somebody leaked to me what's called a bubble chart of like the church's own defined arch enemies in the world, and my name is on it. So I consider that a crowning achievement, personally. But what would you say the church's list of top enemies are?
Apostates. Apostates. They are the worst. Many people leave this organization and they don't say anything when they leave. But for those who speak up after they leave, they are the worst. And it's been like that ever since I was a child. We used to attend conventions in Hampton, Virginia. And we were told when you drive out, because they used to have witnesses out there, ex-witnesses with signs up and stuff. And I remember being told as a child, do not even look at them. When you drive through, just keep your eyes straight. And I'll never forget, man, I was in the back seat and I turned around and I looked out the back window. And there was a little boy. He was probably about my age. He had to be about my age, and he had a little son. And he wasn't foaming at the mouth. His eyes weren't red and flaming with fire. He looked like a kid like me. And I'll never forget that. And so one of the things that the Watchtower has very skillfully, I mean, this is all about, and we tell people on our channel, this is by design, folks. You need to understand, this is not happenstance. This is by design. The Watchtower spends an enormous amount of time discussing former members and how to view them, how to treat whatever they say. For example, right now, the buzzword in the Watchtower right now, as we are talking, if someone says to you child abuse, you think apostate lies. And what that does, that shuts down the conversation, even if it's a legitimate issue being discussed. You can't discuss child abuse. Every witness knows as of today, any statement about abuse is because it's coming from the apostates trying to make us look bad. And so once again, the conversation stops.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So there would be like Ray Francis' book, Australian Royal Commission.
Yeah,
All right, go slowly. Ray Francis's book is called what?
Crisis of Conscience.
Okay, several people have mentioned that in the
That was a
comments
high-profile defection that you guys.
Yeah, the highest.
But what I think one of the advantages towards the organization was that during the time where you had that high-profile defection, the governing body was not, like, no one knew who they were. And so that worked, I think, towards the advantage of the organization, because there, like, many Jehovah Witnesses could go like, oh, maybe he's lying. Like, how do we know that it's him? Because nobody knew who the governing body was.
Yeah, the average Jehovah's Witness could not name you 4 or 5 members of the governing body.
now
they can. Now they can, because these guys are high profile. But the old governing body, when I was there, most people knew Fred Franz because he was president, and they knew Grant Suter because he was the secretary treasurer, because their names are in all the books. But the rest of the guys, Sidlig, Greenleaf, they didn't know any of these guys. They didn't know any of these guys.
And you're saying this book that came out, Crisis of Conscience, brought those names into the consciousness, or what?
Yeah, because they started naming people that you didn't know, and that's what he talked about. He talked about his fellow governing body members.
So he was an insider. This guy.
He was on the governing body. He was the nephew.
He was like an apostle.
Yeah, he was in the Mormon church. You call him an apostle.
Tell us his story. Give us the 2-minute version of his story.
His story was he grew up.
Tell us his name one more time. His name is
Raymond Franz.
Ray Franz. Okay.
Ray Franz. He is the nephew of Fred Franz, who was the president of the Watchtower.
Okay.
So you actually had 2 family members who were serving on the governing body at the same time.
Nepotism is alive and well.
Yeah, nepotism. Yeah.
Right.
And so if Raymond Franz had not written his book, a lot of the stories about the organization would have never been known, especially the backstory as to why certain doctrines were changed. That to me was probably the most important thing, as he explained how these doctrines were known sometimes for decades, that they were wrong. They just couldn't figure how to write it up and change it. And so they knew they would meet all 10, 15 of them. I know it's wrong, but we just got to keep it going. And so when you read that, you're like, oh my God, these guys knew that they was pulling our legs the whole while.
And another one would be Barbara Anderson.
Yeah.
She was the one that broke the story about the child molestation, because she was she worked with one of the governing body at New York, and JT used to work for her husband in Bethel.
Yeah.
So she was another top heavy hitter that brought information out about this religion.
Yeah. She was one of the few women, and I did. You got to love these guys, man. These guys are good. She worked in the writing department, which is typically a male-dominated department. But it's what she and the other women did. The women did the research. They had to go through hundreds of books and drafts and then turn in their work. And the writer, he might use 3 sentences from a 45-page document that they had been working on. So the men didn't do the heavy research. They let the women do it. And then they would just take, I'll use paragraph 1. That's it. Thank you. I worked on this for 6 months. So
and then another one would have been when we first left was his name Simon.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a he's not really well. I don't know if his name is really out there that much, but he's the one that put together Jehovah's Witness.net.
Mm-hmm.
And he brought all these Jehovah's Witnesses together on a bulletin board, and it's still out there, and people are still able to connect with each other. So they would have that on the chopping block.
Yeah.
Jehovah's Witness.net. That was one of the biggest ones we were on back in the day.
Yeah.
And then I'm guessing you guys would be on the list now.
Oh,
And,
yeah.
Randy
Oh, yeah.
Waters was on there, Free
Yeah.
Minds, and then of course John Cedar's channel.
Yeah.
He would be one of them as well.
Yeah.
That's
Because-
Lloyd Evans, right?
Lloyd Evans, Lloyd
Yeah.
Evans.
Yeah.
He would be on there big time.
Yeah.
They've been after him for a while now. Lloyd Evans.
It's kind of ironic
Yeah.
about our site because not only am I on the site, most of the guys at Bethel know me. That's JT. What are you doing up there on TV?
But
And
what
so
but see what it is
it's
we
kind of
went.
sad. It's
But
kinda
see what it
sad.
is we're not using it. See, I think Lloyd got flagged a couple of times with copyright stuff.
You have to be careful.
But
using
we're
society
not
stuff.
using any. When I did the time slip, I
Yeah.
redrew that on a computer. So we don't use any of their material.
Yeah, because they got guys who watch the channels very carefully, and that's why they'll submit the paperwork. They're good. They're really
Mhm.
good. And one of the things that we definitely do, we'll go over the information and says let's redo this because
Mhm.
we know the guys down in legal are watching and they be sending something off to get your site
Right.
flagged. So we try to stay away from it because actually we don't really need that. I mean, we tell people go do your own homework, look it up, which then protects us from having to put up copyrighted material. But for those who want to know about this organization,
Right.
you can find it. That's what makes it so nice today. You can find it.
So in Mormonism, there's this thing called the CES letter. The name doesn't make any sense, but it's basically like one PDF, one document, maybe 80 pages that lists like the biggest problems in Mormonism, its history, its scripture, its doctrine, its theology, its changes, its problems. And you can read that document in like 3, 4, or 5 hours. And it's just devastating. When somebody stumbles on that, it can be a matter of days, if not hours, before they're out. Is there like a source of information where if you want to read all the problems with the church and the history and the citations, is there like a resource of the listing of the problems with the evidence to back it up? Do you guys have something like that?
Well, I ran across something on Wikipedia the other day that had a whole bunch of stuff up there. But then there's also that JW Facts.
That's
channel.
probably the best channel. JW.
Well, tell us
Facts.
what that is.
It's a website that
What's it called?
It's called JW Facts.
JWFACTS.
Mhm.
Uh-huh.
And what it does, it literally takes the Watchtower's public. I mean, this guy, he really put a lot of work into that. It basically takes the Watchtower publications and allows the person themselves to read it directly from the Watchtower. And many times there's very little commentary. You just read it for yourself and tell me what it says. And so if you are a sincere person and you are willing to, if you're a sincere person and you're willing to say, you have to reach the point in your life where you say, you know what, and this is where we went to, and everybody we know, they went there. You reach the point where you say, I'm gonna let the chips fall where they may. I'm gonna call a spade a spade. If you are at that point in your life, then when you read this, regardless of what it says, you're gonna accept what you read because you realize this is the stuff that they wrote. This is not made
Yeah.
up.
What the JW Facts is all about is he just went out and got all of the Watchtower's quotes, past, failures, failed teachings. So like when people email us and they say, can you give me the Watchtower article to such and such? If they just go to JW Facts and just put that in there, they could find it themselves. You don't need somebody else to like give you that information. You can just go there and get it.
Yeah.
And the thing is, you got to know what you're reading. Because like a lot of people that weren't Jehovah's Witnesses back in the day may not even understand some of the things that they taught back in the day.
Yeah.
That's the issue that people are going to have is trying to correlate and put all these things together and how they fit with the teachings today.
Yeah.
So how is the church responding to this deluge of apostates and critics and information, to the YouTube channels? Is the church responding? And if so, how are they responding?
Watchtower articles. They have their meetings and they address the issues that's going on. And they'll even talk about, apostate lies. They even talked about mentally diseased people. And they mentioned this in their publications.
Yeah, in their magazine.
And so then you have a situation where they'll go to the Kingdom Hall on Sunday. They're studying an article about somebody who fell away from the organization. And you got to remember where you first learned God's name. And this is Jehovah's visible organization. And so they just plant these seeds and they just constantly bombard Jehovah's Witnesses with all this information to counterattack us so that we can't get through to our loved ones. Then they will find examples. And that's why we always say, when you leave this religion, don't be a Watchtower poster child, because then they can use you as the example.
What does that mean? What does that mean?
What that means is a person that leaves and they start living worse than they did when they were a Jehovah's Witness.
What are the examples? How? What do they do? What are the behaviors?
Let's say somebody, maybe they're on drugs now. Maybe they're, wino. Maybe they're, whatever they're doing something that they wouldn't have been doing as a witness. Maybe they don't look the same. Maybe you can't recognize them, because a lot of times people say, if I'm going to get me a job, and now I used to be a Jehovah's Witness, and now I can look any way I want. So now I'm walking down the street with a skirt, with a postage stamp skirt on,
tattoos.
And my looks are different than what it used to be as a Jehovah's Witness. But a lot of times people don't realize that Jehovah's Witnesses are not the only people that dress nice or that dress respectful. So if I'm going on a job interview, I'm not going to get that job because they're going to be like, wait a minute, we can't have you working here. But so they become that poster child, the person that nobody wants to hire. Nobody wants to be around. So then the Jehovah's Witness, when they see you leave and start doing bad or start looking different or whatever, then all of a sudden they're like, this is why you don't leave Jehovah. You stay here. So when they see people like that go to college, get their degree, they're moving on in the world, they're doing good for themselves, then you can't be the person that they say is a bad example. Because most people say, if I leave this religion, where am I going? Because that's the big thing now. It's like, if I leave the Jehovah's Witnesses, where will I go? And they teach people that. They teach the witnesses, when you leave here, where are you going?
Our leaders, just in a recent general conference, one of our leaders asked, where will you go?
Yes.
If the church isn't, if you don't think the church is perfect, well, where will you go? That's actually a rhetoric that our leaders are using against our people.
Yeah. And so like JT always would say, what's that statement you always say? When you leave, you telling them to, success is the best revenge.
Oh yeah.
And so if you leave and you show yourself successful, hey Sonny, thank you. So then when they leave and success is the best revenge, then it's like, what are you going to say now to the people that's left behind?
Yeah. Because what they teach you is, once you leave, your life will basically go, quote unquote, to hell in the handbasket. And so if you leave this organization and next thing they see you on the news getting arrested for robbing the bank, as an elder, I used to use people like that. I used to say, some of y'all probably remember the brother that was in our congregation years ago. As you see, he's in the paper this week. Very sad. Imagine if he was here in the Kingdom Hall today, he wouldn't be locked up. And so if you're a young kid, like when I was growing up, like, I don't want to leave. I don't want to leave. And because that's all we saw. And it was really sad. Growing up, all I saw was people who left. Their life became like a wreck. I never saw the witnesses who left and went on to become doctors and lawyers and dentists and active people in their community. We never saw those. We never saw those. And that's what the game changer is today. People are literally picking up their bag, walking out the Kingdom Hall, and they are putting one foot in front of the other. And they're going on with their lives without having to end up in jail on crack selling dope.
Yeah, because one lady I met, she was on this. I had hosted this ladies' night for Jehovah's Witnesses several years ago, and she went on to become a judge.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so what that does, that upsets the apple cart, because that's not what you were told was going to happen if you left. I mean, I take, for example, I take ourselves, for example. We run into witnesses all the time, and they'll look at us like, y'all don't look broke down in word and depressed. Because they say y'all were going to be depressed if you leave the truth. And you'll be like, how you doing? Pretty good day. How you take care of yourself? Good to see you again. And they'll stand there like, am I supposed to talk to JT? Can we say something to him? Are they free? And so they just lost. And so that's the whole point behind success is the best revenge, because when people see you live your life well after leaving them, they become confused because they're not seeing what they were told they were going to see.
Yeah, and that's honestly, I mean, honestly, I don't have the explicit intention on Mormon Stories podcast of getting people to leave the church, but what I can tell you is I've interviewed, almost 1,500 hours of people who end up leaving the church. And it's so powerful when you see these couples doing well, happy, smiling with their kids, saying I've left, or I stopped believing, and now I'm happier than ever. Business is going better than ever. I'm a better parent. I'm a better husband. I'm a better wife. I'm a better mother. I'm a better father. I'm even make better money. Like, it is so devastating to the control that the church has on people, for there to be happy, healthy, thriving people tell their stories. And that's what Mormon Stories is all about. And I just want to also say we're doing a series on high demand religions or cults, and just this idea of dependence, of learned helplessness. That is what abusive partners and spouses do. And that is what high demand religions or cults do, is they teach you that you can't be happy and healthy without them. And when anybody teaches you that, whether it's a partner, a spouse, a child, a company, a business, a church, a podcaster, run from that person.
Yeah.
Run from that person.
It's time to go.
They take over your life. And so what we find is that leaving this religion is like a burden has been lifted off your shoulders, and you can now, your life is now your life. And you don't have to wake up feeling guilty, or your conditional friends. Last week you were my friend because I put 50 hours out knocking on doors, and this week I didn't do nothing. So now I can't come to your cookout, and, or I can't be invited to be on the assembly programs, convention programs, because I can't tell the story of quitting my job to pioneer, because you got to have these crazy experiences that go along with Jehovah's Witness life in order to be invited on that platform to share your experience. So they don't want to hear nothing about you going to school to get a degree, and now you're going to be on the Watchtower program telling everybody that. And I tell friends all the time. I got people that are friends of mine, and they're telling me, well, I know a Jehovah's Witness, and they don't do that. They talk to me still. They're still my friend. And I said, well, you go to the Kingdom Hall and you tell them to tell everybody at the Kingdom Hall that you guys are friends and that you guys hang out on the weekends together. I said, because they will not be celebrated for doing that.
Yeah. Okay. So next question. I guess I asked this before. What the church is doing to deal with all these people leaving. You said they're tagging everyone as apostate. And basically telling everyone to stay away from apostates. Our church, the Mormon church, is trying to become more honest and open about its problematic history because so many people leave feeling betrayed. So it's trying to become transparent about its history, but it's trying to do so with spin and with contextualization that doesn't really own up to its problems. It's trying to kind of whitewash its history and spin it in a more truthful, but in a still deceptive way. It's trying to show the appearance of being friendly to LGBT people. It's trying to create the appearance of being more friendly to women and less patriarchal. It's trying to share ways, promote alternative ways of believing in less literal ways while still not endorsing those alternative points of view. It's trying to use commercials and media and YouTube and social media. It's trying to take over the internet, the Mormon internet, by Instagram and Twitter and Facebook and YouTube, trying to beat the apostates at their own game by becoming better at social media. Is your church doing any of that type of stuff or other types of things?
Oh yeah, the Watchtower is moving away from. They are moving away from hard doctrines. They're going more to fluff and cotton candy. They have split the Watchtower into 2 magazines, one for the public and one basically for the witness in the congregation. The magazine that they share with the public is such fluff. I mean, we're talking about cotton candy. Oh my goodness. The days of having a magazine that will talk about Babylon the Great and how the churches will be destroyed, that typically will not be placed at people's homes again.
They would make articles about other churches, right? Like they would make articles. They would write articles about the Mormon Church, about the Catholic Church, and those were the magazines that they were giving to people.
Those days are gone. They are moving more along the lines of the Joel Osteen feel-good magazines. That's what they're doing now. The witnesses are getting now. They're doing this publicly. This is what makes it so sad. This is just a public persona. At the Kingdom Hall, they still got magazines. They're leaving alone a lot of the trying to predict things. They're leaving alone a lot of the deep doctrines. They used to have this teaching called the types and the antitypes, where these would be doctrines that you would go to the meeting and you would not understand a thing. And they would tell you the reason why, because it's solid food and you can't grasp solid food now. They're just pushing all that away. They're moving.
Why are you laughing, Gerardo? Why are you laughing?
Just the milk before meat.
Milk before meat. That's what we say.
That's what they call it. That's what they call it. Yeah, you're right. They are meeting. They are having those meetings together. And so they're having those meetings together. And so now that's what they're doing. The Watchtower is building basically a media center. When I was a kid, I remember asking, have you ever heard of David and Goliath?
Yeah.
David and Goliath was a little claymation that came out years ago, and they ran it for years. Little boy and his dog. It was I think the Episcopalian Church put it out. And they always had like little Bible stories, little principles: don't steal, don't lie, be honest. And I remember talking to brothers about that. Why does society do some cartoons for the kids? And they're like, Jehovah's serious. God is serious. Oh, cartoon. No cartoon. Do you know the #1 tool they have for young children now in the Watchtower? Caleb and Sophia, which is a cartoon character. I mean, it's like, it's like Donald Duck, Daffy Duck. It's just a cartoon character. And so now they're building a multimedia facility that, from what I understand and talking to certain people, it is literally going to rival MGM, the major studios. They will have the capacity to shoot film at the level of an MGM.
And then you said they're sending people to acting school.
They're now, this is crazy, man. They are now sending Jehovah's Witnesses to acting school. There were witnesses who wanted to go into the theater, wanted to go into the arts, and they got dogged. And now all of a sudden, the Watchtower wants to send people to the theater to learn how to do acting, to be or not to be, that kind of crazy stuff. And so this religion is changing, trying to keep up with the times. And it's going to work for some people because there are some people who like the program. The doctrines don't mean much to them. And that's kind of where the organization is going. Don't worry about the doctrines. Okay, maybe we got this wrong, but we teach you not to steal and lie. That's a good enough, ain't it? And so now the organization is becoming more like watered down. The teachings are just that, watered down.
remember though, see the Watchtower kind of speaks out of both sides of their mouth because they have the magazine called the Awake magazine. And the Awake magazine is that magazine that kind of like gives you those puffball articles, and it tells people that they can go spend the weekend with their family and go to the zoo, and they'll give you like, oh, husbands and wives should be, they should do this, and so they give you all those little nice articles, like you said, John, about how how the Mormons are trying to counteract all the things. But then the teaching magazine, everybody knows how to treat the Awake magazine, but then everybody knows the one that they got to really follow is the Watchtower, because that's the one that they study those questions. You got to read the paragraph and answer the question.
Yeah.
So the Watchtower always leaves itself with an out, because somebody can say, well, you just said we couldn't go to college, but here's an article right here that said that they could go, or they would kind of give an inference to it. So then Jehovah's Witnesses are like, well, they said that we couldn't over here. Then they said we could over there, but they know the hard answer is no. So it's really they trip up their adherents. The other thing that they're trying to do, I'm not gonna say we did this because I don't want to be saying all that, but we did a video about should I fade or disassociate. And the next thing we knew, we were telling people how to get out this religion and how all you got to do is move to another congregation, have your publisher record card sent, whatever. And the next thing we know, we were hearing that they were telling people that if they weren't at the meetings, that they should treat them like soft shunning these people. So people couldn't fade anymore.
You can't fade.
You can't fade.
What's the difference between fading and disassociating? What's the difference?
Disassociation is when you actually physically write a letter and give it to the elders saying, I no longer want to be one of Jehovah's Witnesses.
So we call that resigning or resignation. You call it disassociation.
It's called disassociation. Fading is when you just start missing meetings. You're not coming to all the meetings, and you just increase that number until you finally literally just fade away, boy. Or people will move to a new area. They'll move from Chicago to Tennessee, and they won't call up the witnesses and let them know there's a new witness in town. They're gone. Right. And a lot of people, they literally just disappear into the system just like that. But what happens is their family and all the witnesses back where they're from, they'll many times still think that they're witnesses where they're gone, but they're not. And so they kind of fade to try to keep family ties open. The change is the family is now calling them up. Oh, y'all down in Tennessee? Y'all going to the Kingdom Hall? Well, yeah. What's the name of the Kingdom Hall you going to? I can't think of the name. I can't. And so all of a sudden they get tripped up. And so so now the organization has now focused on people who are trying to fade. You will basically be approached and asked, what are you going to do? And the bottom line is what you're going to do. And let us know now. And that's been putting a lot of people in bad positions, man.
Well, a lot of people don't know that they don't have, like you said, you're in another state, but they don't even have to know that you left the organization, And then there's the channel, the Mike and Kim channel. They keep track. They put out the breaking news information, and they tell everybody about the latest happenings in the Watchtower, what's going on Zoom and all that kind of stuff. So this one sister was telling me that she tunes into that channel to get the latest and breaking news, so that she can still tell her family members that she knows what's going on in the organization. So all these ex-witnesses out here on the internet, they do. We all have a place. We all are working together because different channels do different things, and they focus on different things, And so it's really helpful when you got all these different channels that's putting out different information,
all the voices,
so that people can really, get the information that they need to get,
So, that makes total sense. One of the dynamics, one of you guys has your audio turned up a little bit too loud because I'm hearing feedback. So I don't know if that's you, Gerardo. One of the things that's happening now with Facebook and with Twitter and social media is there's more and more Mormons that are questioning their church or even speaking vocally about problems with the church. And so the Mormon church is starting to hold disciplinary councils where you're getting excommunicated. And so the church is really clamping down on any Mormon that's speaking publicly against the church or criticizing the church or even just disagreeing with the church publicly, the church is really clamping down. Is any of that happening right now in your church?
Oh yeah, man. People get caught on the internet. People come to their houses, check their cookies, see that you've been on witness sites. We look at we have realized that a lot of people who watch our channel, they cannot subscribe. Because remember, when you subscribe, basically you get notifications. And if you're a Jehovah's Witness sitting in a car with 5 other witnesses and all of a sudden JT and Lady Cee pop up on the screen, you're in trouble. You're in some serious trouble. And so witnesses have to do, like right now, there are going to be Jehovah's Witnesses who are watching this show. But these are grown men and women who, unfortunately, because of the way the organization is structured, they have to do this secretly. You know, you're 35, 45, 50 years old, paying your own house note, car note, water bill, and you have to do this secretly. And when you tell non-Jehovah's Witnesses, you know, I have to do this secretly at night, I can't let nobody see me, they look at you like, you got to be kidding me, man. And so, but that's the way the culture is. That's why I tell people, the teachings and the culture, you have every witness who comes on our site, even if they are defending the Watchtower, even if they are defending the organization, if they are caught, a good elder is going to have to deal with them. And so
it's not just being caught, though, because remember that the Jehovah's Witnesses have a very specific vocabulary that they got to use as well. So one of the things that I found when I left the organization was you slip and say something, and they quickly know that you're not keeping up a Watchtower.
Oh yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Like the language.
The language is so, you know, they have this vocabulary they use, the language that they use. And so, you know, I think it's the fear factor.
Oh yeah.
With the subscriptions to the internet, to the website. But I think that we begin to talk different a lot of times when people stop going to the meetings and stuff too. Don't they?
Sometimes they do. But because they're still going to the meetings, they know what to say and what not to say. It's literally a whole language. If you use the word PO, they know you haven't been to the Kingdom Hall in years because there is no more PO. If you say district convention, they know that you don't even go because it's not called a district convention, it's called a regional. And so the language, in psychology, we learn that language and words, it's like the 1984 movie, Newspeak. That's what it is, Newspeak. The witnesses have perfected Newspeak. I will give them credit for that. They got Newspeak down to a science. Yeah.
But if you said something that you saw on the internet, like when there were people that were saying something about the Australian Royal Commission, and the brother at the Kingdom Hall had never heard of that before. And so he knew that person had been somewhere looking on the internet.
If you ever say anything about information that you got off the internet and it is not jw.org, as a witness, you dismiss it. It has no effect. I mean, the organization has got people taught so much that if you say that your information is from anywhere except jw.org, it's going to get dismissed.
Exactly.
It's just as simple. I mean, that's a perfect system. I mean, you're talking about locking folks down, lock down. No conversation. You will never have a conversation of Jehovah's Witnesses saying, you know, brother, I was on internet and I was reading something so and so. When you read that? It was just a site on biblical history. No, that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. Not going to happen.
You literally have to walk on eggshells when you're at the Kingdom Hall and you're trying to fade, because if you're talking to us and having a conversation, you could slip one of these words out.
I know.
At that point, they're going to mark you, and you slip too many of them words out, you're going to get disfellowshipped.
I know.
And what is disfellowshipment like in the Jehovah's Witness Church?
It is probably the worst thing that could happen to a person psychologically and emotionally, and many times even physically, because it results in you being cut off from all ties with the only community that you know. Jehovah's Witnesses do not associate in general with people who are not witnesses. Hence, you will rarely hear a Jehovah's Witness refer to someone who is not a witness as, this is my best friend. They're not going to do that. So your entire framework is built on this congregation and the organization. When you're disfellowship, they take all that away from you. As a result, you're standing out there with nothing to do. Probably the best example just that most people can relate to is the Amish. Imagine an Amish kid 19, 20 years old, is kicked out of the Amish farm, and now he's in New York City. Can you imagine what he's up against? He's dressed just like he's dressed in the hills of Pennsylvania, but he's on Broadway. So he just becomes a target for everything, and he is totally lost. That's the way it is for the average Jehovah's Witness. And that's why some people we know, they leave and they're like, I can't do it, man. And when I remember, I don't know if you ever seen the movie, what was it? It's called it's Morgan Freeman and it's a woman in prison. Shawshank
Redemption.
Yes, there is a scene in that movie of an older man who's been in this institution for so many years.
Yeah.
They let him go free. He's free. You can do what you want to do.
Yeah.
He committed suicide.
Yeah.
Because he could not deal with the outside world. And I know that for a fact because my father worked at the prison. My father retired from the prison in North Carolina. There are people who have been there so long that when they leave, they feel better being in an institutional environment. And that's kind of the way it is for a Jehovah's Witness, especially a long-time witness. They find I'm more comfortable here. This is my Linus blanket. I'm not letting go. And so
Southern Boss Lady says that Jehovah's Witness disfellowship is the same thing as Mormon excommunication.
Yes.
Thank you, SBL. So would you say disfellowshipments are on the rise right now?
They rise every year. In fact, let me just see how bad it has gotten. The Watchtower at one time actually published the number of people who were disfellowshipped. And the question all the elders asked was, are we going to get this number every year in the publications? And I remember talking to someone who works in the actual department that releases the numbers. And the decision was made that they felt that because of the number of people being disfellowshipped, that number would prove to be too discouraging. Yeah. So we're not going to list it in the publications anymore.
I think I remember it being like, was it 32,000?
I'm not for sure what the number was,
because we were still in the organization.
But they no longer release it, and that's the reason why the number, because it would make a statement like, oh my goodness,
yeah.
Because it's very important to understand. Basically, for every person who is disfellowshipped, we were told at our elders school that roughly about 2 to 3 people are disciplined or reproved. So for every disfellowship, there's about 2 to 3 people who actually reproved. They're the ones who got by. They was forgiven. They didn't get fired. But they put them on probation, basically.
Well, they can't have that number out there because then they can no longer say that they're not tainted or whatever they want to say. Yeah. Like they're just as bad as any other religion, you know.
And that's kind of the catch-22 is people begin to see that witnesses. The Watchtower is interesting. As a Jehovah's Witness, as a Watchtower organization, we bragged about how we are so different from the world. When the child molestation issue came out, we didn't brag. Witnesses didn't brag that, we're different because we're God's people. Instead, what the Watchtower said, well, we're like any other community that's having problems in this area. We're no different. Now, you used to be God's people. You used to be God's channel. Now, all of a sudden, you're just regular church like down the street. And so the witnesses, the organization plays whatever works to their advantage. That's how they do it. They always do that. And they're good. I mean, the guys are good.
And I just want to say, again, this is proof that there's a retreat of leaders of these organizations. Our church published its statistics. We have a general conference twice a year where they always publish members, how many people have joined, how many missionaries. And it was always like this big thing because decades ago, the church was growing and everybody was excited because every time we went 10 million, 11 million, 12 million, 13 million, it was all like, oh my gosh, the second coming is nigh, the Jesus is coming back. Like, oh, we're growing, we're going to take over the earth. And then all of a sudden, the numbers started getting more and more problematic. The growth started slowing. People started slicing and dicing the numbers and realizing that that there was a problem here. And guess what was announced a few years ago? JT and Lady Cee, you guys might be able to guess what was announced, maybe.
That they would cease releasing the numbers.
They stopped releasing the numbers in general conference.
Wow.
Yeah. So our people are talking, brother.
They're talking, man.
Our people are talking.
They're talking.
Well, they're going to the same conventions, right?
No, they're coaching each other. It's like, what do we do with these YouTubers? We got to do something. Okay, so let me ask you that. Like, I have been attacked viciously. I've been called you know, a child abuser. I've been called you know, a rapist. You know, just like that, they're really coming after their critics, trying to smear them, trying to destroy them, trying to defame them. Is the church, what's it like being an activist against the you know, the witnesses? Is it hard? Does the church come at you? Do the members come at you? Or is it awesome and fun? What's it like to try and speak truth to power? What's it like?
Well, we haven't got those kind of things that somebody said. Remember the time somebody said that we were part of the Illuminati?
It was part of the Illuminati. And I was like, well, so that, am I going to get to hang out with Jay-Z and Beyonce? If I'm part of the Illuminati, let me know. And
But you guys aren't being attacked by the church? The church isn't attacking you?
But the church hasn't attacked us.
As I said before, the organization's position is we do not respond to apostates. They will never debate someone who has left the organization. That is the official policy. We will, because first of all, we don't talk to you. See, they take it to a different level. We don't even talk to you. So don't think we're going to debate these teachings. And so as a witness, they're told we do not debate them. But the problem is witnesses can't help themselves. That is why they come on these channels all the time. And you can't get mad at them because you're taking away the only thing that they have. Like I said, it's Linus's blanket from the Peanuts.
Right.
And so people respond back. And it's interesting because what happens is there's a pattern. Because former Jehovah's Witnesses, for the most part, many of us, we did exactly the same thing. We went onto these channels and we tried to defend the organization. Because I know I did. I was up here as an elder. Well, no, this.
Right.
And I couldn't do it, man. The guys they were cleaning my clock. They was cleaning my clock because I was willing to go back. When I first came on the internet, this is interesting. When I first came on the internet, there were elders, circuit overseers, pioneers, people with serious titles in this organization. Even a guy from Bethel was actually online. And so we would have conversations back and forth about the organization, elders, arrangements. And then the society made the announcement, basically, if anybody's up here on these sites, we're going to take your stripes. And all of a sudden, all the elders, ministerial service, anybody with a title left the internet. They were gone. And it left basically people who didn't have any position, which meant they didn't have access to any of the information. Because that was why I left. I had two elders, former elders, they challenged me. They said, JT, you the secretary. Go back and look in the file and look under these records here and tell me what it says. Now go to the Kingdom Hall and look it up. I'm like, oh man, they got me. And so after a while, you get tired of losing because you realize you're being told things and introduced to things that you didn't know was in the file cabinet. Letters from the organization you had no idea existed because they go back so many years. And then you back there to read. Some Saturdays, my wife would be like, where JT at? I would be at the Kingdom Hall looking through the file like, oh man, I ain't realize oh Lord, have mercy. We was crazy. And so
yeah.
And so I began to see like, man, this ain't what I thought it was. And that's what happened.
But you know what, John, we got just the opposite effect almost from our activism, because in our little community here in the area that we live in, we just can't believe the number of people that find us.
Yeah.
We're at the Kennedy Center, some lady said. Oh, I was like, I think there's our friends down there. And she turned around and she says, I know that voice from somewhere.
So you guys get noticed.
You on YouTube, you know? We're at BJ's and a lady was coming. We thought she was coming to ask us for some coupons. And she was like, I just saw you on YouTube last night. We were at Best Buy. Yeah. And a guy comes up and says, JT and Lady Cee, I follow you on you. We couldn't believe it. So everywhere we go, we're running into all these people. He's at the gas station. I was at the elevator at my job. And people are just saying, you guys are doing a good work. Keep up the good work. So we just can't believe the number of people that are just getting our message.
The best one, the best one I had, this is so funny, man. I'm at work. I am at work. I am walking down the hall and I'm seeing this guy coming toward me and he has his iPhone. He look at the iPhone, look at me, and we're walking toward each other. And then he passes me and then he turns around like, are you JT? And so I said, yeah. He says, man, I'm looking at you on the YouTube right now. And so people are finding out this information because it pops up on their feeds. And so,
but I got even a better one. I have an even better one. I mean, we can't make this up.
Yeah, you can't make this kind of stuff up.
We're in Detroit.
Yeah. Oh.
Baker's Keyboard Lounge, hanging out, celebrating our anniversary. It's a small jazz club. So we're the tourists, you know. And so there's this lady, you know, I got my little I had my little video camera and I'm recording the show. So I go and when I get back home, I put this online. You know, it was a good show. It was two ladies, they were singing, it was a band and all this kind of stuff. So JT and I, we sit in the kitchen last week and you know, I had gotten this email from this sister telling me about her situation with her family. She said, what do I do? You know, I got like 5 siblings. They're Jehovah's Witnesses. They're disfellowshipped. And I'm the only one in the organization. She said, but I'm sick. And she said, and I need some assistance. What do I do? So I'm emailing this lady back and telling her what to do, giving her some advice, blah, blah, blah. So then maybe 2 weeks later, I get another email and I'm sitting there and I'm like, this lady, she's sending an email. She said, hey, I reached out to you before. Now I'm reaching back out to you again. And then she goes on to tell me, I saw the picture on my Gmail. I'm like, that lady looks so familiar, right? So then I look down, I see the area code. It's a Michigan area code. I see her name. I said, Jay, don't tell me that this is the lady from Baker's Keyboard Lounge. She was the lady that had been singing at the club that night. She was.
Wow, that's awesome.
She was calling out for her. I grabbed my phone. I was like, girl, don't tell me. Don't tell me this is you. I said, what are the odds that you will be hanging out, having a great time at a jazz supper club, and a person that you were in their audience would reach out to you and say, I need help. I'm one of Jehovah's Witnesses, you know, and I need some help. And I was like, oh my God. So we have so many experiences that we just can't believe. Yeah. And it's like, come on, Hollywood, come and knock on our door so we can share this with you. You know, it's crazy.
No, I shouldn't talk about the haters so much because the number of people that love what Mormon Stories or the work that I do or the other people that are in this field, it's tens of thousands, if not over 100, you know, if not in the hundreds of thousands of people at this point.
Yeah.
I was recognized at times, you know, at Central Park in New York. I get recognized in the airport whenever I travel. And in Utah, I've had people pass me on the airplane, show me Mormon Stories as they're listening to the podcast as they walk by. Like, in fact, our YouTube channels are almost identical. We both have around 31,000 subscribers. So I think we share kind of a similar level of kind of a profile. And isn't that wonderful that people are so kind and generous, and that YouTube or podcasts allow us to help and reach so many people? It really is a beautiful thing. And I love to hear that you guys have those similar types of experiences.
Yeah, it's a good feeling. When you are one of Jehovah's Witnesses, the objective is to bring people into the organization. And I look back now, we have probably been responsible for just multiple people in comparison to how many people we brought in. And this is what the internet does. It makes it possible for people to find out something in the privacy of their home. And that's the key. They can look at this stuff every night without having to talk to anyone about it. And that's what people do. We've had people who said, JT, I've been watching your site for 3 or 4 years before I even said anything. And now they're gone. Now they're going back to school to get their law degree. And so you see how people, if you give people information, and this is why cults don't give out information. They control the flow of information. I guess that's the best way to put it. But when you give people information, just like the guy who used to run the store in New York City, his name was Cy Sims. He said an educated consumer is his best customer. And that's really true. And that's the same way it is with anything. With more information, people can buy better cars, they can buy better products, because now they can go and check it out. Well, interestingly, it's the same thing now for religions.
Mm-hmm. Amen.
Hey, Rob.
From Geeks to God says JT
Hey
and
there.
Lady C.
Yeah, we know him.
Yeah, we know.
He's,
Yeah,
he's like our play son.
yeah.
I love it. Let me just ask you really quickly: do you guys ever get attacked by other ex-Jehovah's Witnesses?
We stay out of that.
Yeah,
arena.
this is. I'm gonna. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead, JT.
This is very important. When I was at Bethel, when I used to be at the Watchtower Society, we used to laugh. We used to laugh. You have 2,400 people rolling on the floor because we used to laugh at former Jehovah's Witnesses and how they argued among themselves. You see, we had a governing body member. He used to talk about, he said, see, this is what happens when they leave. They're not unified. See, we know we're unified. Same language, same speech. And of course, the problem is that one of the mistakes that too many former Jehovah's Witnesses make, and they make this mistake in very different aspects of this issue. When we were at the Kingdom Hall, we all had to think the same, act the same, had the same views, the same values. Everybody had to be in lockstep. Unfortunately, when people sometimes leave a high control group and they end up hooking up or meeting up with people who were in the same control group that they were in, they make the sad mistake of thinking that we need to think the same still. And you don't. That was the biggest relief for us when we left, that I no longer have to think like other people. I no longer have to have the same views and perspectives and ideas that other people have on any subject, any subject. And so sometimes you will see former Jehovah's Witnesses attack each other. But as far as the organization is concerned, they are laughing at them. And because we know that, we refuse to get involved in any silly argument. Because at the end of the day, if you're not talking about this issue, then you're not talking about anything. We have seen people on the internet. I'm like, man, that's so silly. Look, they need to cut that out. Because the boys at Bethel, the boys in New York, they are laughing. They are laughing their behinds off. And so we just refuse to get into such petty stuff because people's lives are at stake. We talk to people, man, who are going to lose their husband, their wife. My wife is leaving me tonight, man. She's packing right now, JT. Look at the camera, man. And his wife is putting stuff in the bag. She's leaving. And so for me to turn on and argue with some Jehovah's Witness over something the society said or some Greek word or Latin word, or, man, I ain't got time for that kind of stuff, man. I tell my fellow time, I just don't have time for that kind of stuff. And the reason why, because I know from a different perspective, this organization is no joke. These boys they play to win. And so that's why when we left, we refused to be a poster child. I just refused to do any. That's why I did not write a disassociation letter. I was not going to waste the pen, paper, or ink to write a disassociation letter. Because elders are taught when you get a disassociation letter, you only read enough to find out, is this person coming back or not? Once you read enough and figure out he ain't coming back, you ball it up and you throw it in the trash. People write 12, 15-page letters. They don't even read that trash. They throw it in the trash. So I'm like, I'm not going to give them the pleasure of on the way out, they still making up rules for me. We need you to write a letter. You ain't writing nothing. You won't get nothing from me. And so understanding how they play their game, this is why, like I tell people, it's like a chess game. When you know every move that your opponent is going to use, you have no reason to lose. You have no reason to lose. As a former Jehovah's Witness, we know everything that they will say, everything that they will do. We know every technique they will use. Learn to flip it and use it to your advantage. And my wife and I, we laugh at how we were so involved in this religion that we couldn't see the forest for the trees.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it. How do you guys support yourselves financially? That was beautiful. Like, I want to clap. And I think my people need to listen more to you guys about that, because we do sometimes get involved in some silliness that doesn't help, that just Salt Lake City, the corporate headquarters laughs. So that was useful to me. So thank you for that. How do you guys support yourself financially? You know, do you work on donations? Do you just do your full-time jobs and this is all volunteer? Because I believe that this stuff should be supported so that it can be sustainable. So how do you guys deal financially with what you do?
We work full-time jobs.
They work full-time jobs, yeah.
We don't solicit money for this channel. We feel like that's just not something we do. We have a hard time, you know, asking for money for people because we realize that people were already in a situation and given money and stuff like that. So we put our own money in, or we use the money from the YouTube ads that we get. That's all we use. So that pays for our equipment, and whatever the YouTube ads don't pay for, we put money in out of our own pocket. And both of us work full-time jobs. So we do not, we don't have a patron account or nothing like that.
Yeah, I mean, some people decide to do that. You know, that's a personal decision. We have people over the years. In fact, we have a number of people. They ask, how can we support you? And we'll say, if you want to give something, fine. But we just haven't gone down that road because at this point we've been able to manage. So, so far so good.
But we might start selling some Lady Cee cups because somebody just sent an email. I'm just kidding.
Some merch.
Somebody just emailed and they wanted to get my Lady Cee cup. So if they're listening, I might put that out there. But we're not trying to do that. I have another YouTube channel that I use for that kind of stuff, commercial stuff on another channel. But we're not trying to get any patrons and stuff like that.
Well, it's a pro, and we know people who do, but see, that's the kind of stuff that, like I said before, what people do, everybody has a voice, okay? Everybody has a different approach. Everybody has a different style. I will not tell someone else what their style should be. Of course, vice versa. I'm not going to let nobody tell me what my style should be either. And for people, if they like your style, they will listen. If they don't like your style, they'll move on. And I'm not, and this is to me, this is so simple. We were Jehovah's Witnesses. People hated us. I spent my entire life growing up being hated. So if somebody disagrees with me now as an adult, it's like, okay, what's new? I mean, at some point, your skin has got to be thicker than Kleenex, okay? And that's just the way it is. And so all my life, I've been hated. I grew up as a witness. So I tell my wife all the time, what is supposed to mean? I was put out of a classroom, 30 kids. Everybody laughed when you walk back in. So for somebody I don't even know, don't see, ain't paying my rent, I cannot use energy to get bent out of shape over people I don't know. And this is what makes the internet so dangerous as well. This type of stuff here can become heady. This kind of stuff can become heady because all of a sudden you got people who want to follow you. And this is to me, this for some people, this can become Charles Taz Russell too. It can become Charles, because that's how Charles Taz Russell got started. Most people start out good intentions, noble, but if you don't check it, if you do not check it, your head can grow because people are constantly praising you. You're the greatest since sliced bread. No, you're not. You ain't the greatest since sliced bread. You just got something that you can help people with, then great. But you have to check yourself. It's very easy when people start praising you. This is why the governing body, this is why they're where they are. This is what happened to Charles Taz Russell.
Yeah.
Charles Taz Russell started out and he heard people saying, I think Charlie is the faithful and discreet slave according to the book of Matthew. Charles Taz Russell had a chance to shut that thing down. He was in charge of every magazine that was published. What he should have done was he should have done the same thing that the angel did to John. When John fell down on his knees and started to worship the angel, what did the angel tell John? He said, man, get up off your knees, man. You will get me in trouble in heaven. Get off your knees. Same thing with Charles Taz Russell. When he started hearing people praise him like that, he should have said, brothers, I'm just trying to share some things I looked up. I'm not no fulfill. When my mama had me, I wasn't fulfilling no Bible prophecy. I'm just Charlie Russell. He didn't do that. He sat back and let people praise him. And the next thing you know, you had a man who now speaks for God. Now, once they got that thing going, they didn't want to get rid of it. And then J.F. Rutherford, they kept it going. We speak for God. And that's how it really started. And once you get that bad boy rolling down the hill, you can't stop it. So the same with people who have YouTube channels and people keep it in perspective. Just keep it in perspective. That's all you got to do. And life will be good. It'll be good. That's She gets so sensitive. She's like, dang, I know. But that's just the way I feel. I think we just have to keep stuff in perspective, man.
No, I'm really moved by the fact that you guys have your own careers and put your own money in. I started that way for years. I've been doing this since 2005, and I had to go get a PhD in psychology just to be able to know how to help all the people that were reaching out to me. And so I started just saying, hey, podcast listeners, if you guys want to support, what we do, I can spend more and more of my time helping people. And what that's ended up doing is growing into a full-time job where literally every morning I wake up and I'm like, how do I make a bigger difference? How do I make the YouTube channel more successful? How do I get better cinematography? How do I start doing events and retreats and workshops and how do I support other people? And so for me, it's grown into a career.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I'm torn because I love the altruism of what you guys are doing. And I'm not saying I make more of a difference with my people than you do with yours.
No.
But what I can say is I do love that there are people that can spend full-time positions trying to support, because there's so many divorces, so many families being blown up, so much depression, so much anxiety, so many LGBT issues, that the more and more people we can have spending more and more time helping people, that's the trade-off. And so that sustainability.
And so the same with us. If circumstances where we would need the help, like I said, people have always asked us. And so at this point, we've been able to manage. And if we can't manage, then, we would ask for help, because we think that the work we do is a good work. It's an important work. And it just goes with that. But at this point, it's something that we've been able to manage so far. But
I think it's beautiful. Gerardo, before we part for tonight, do you have any final questions, Gerardo, for JT or Lady Cee?
No, I think this was great.
Do you want to say anything to him?
Just that I admire what they do. I think it's great work. I've seen some of their videos, and it's a lot of work, and I admire what they do and thank them for helping their community. And at the end, we're all on this together. We were all part of, in different levels, but part of the high demand organizations that have caused some issues or situations in our lives, and we're glad to be out, and we want to help people who are on their way out, or just to inform consent. If they want to stay, that's fine. All my family are members of the Mormon Church and active members. But informed consent.
Yeah.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Yeah.
Well, JT, Lady Cee. Yeah. Thank you, Gerardo. I'm so glad you joined us today. JT and Lady Cee, I just want to say that one of the things I said to Leah Remini and Mike Rinder is, what if we're more powerful cross-supporting and cooperating between traditions than what we're able to do in our own silos? And so I have this vision someday of maybe even an annual conference where ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, ex-Scientologists, ex-Mormons, ex-evangelical Christians, ex-Jews, ex-Muslims, we can all start coming together and learning from each other, supporting each other, strategizing together, and figuring out ways where the aggregate of what we're doing can actually become more powerful than the sum of its parts. And so I'm inspired by you guys. I'm inspired by Lloyd Evans. I'm inspired by Chris Shelton of Scientology, Leah, Mike Rinder. There's so many brilliant people out there. I want to just put a little birdie in your ear to say, what if we're to collaborate more? Oh, and I'm going to come on your YouTube channel.
Yeah.
What if we could collaborate more? I want to just have us start thinking about that. I know that I have listeners that are ex-Jehovah's Witnesses.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And
as we mentioned before, they cross over because as you said, they all attend the same conference.
Yeah. So let's collaborate. Let's learn from each other, and let's find ways to help make each other successful. But most importantly, we've all got these, and this is something we didn't get to talk about. What are the ways we can help people build a new life outside of their religious tradition, so that they don't fall back into another cult, or so that they don't wreck their lives? And maybe we should end with that. If you were to give parting words for my listeners or for yours, what's the best advice you guys have for somebody leaving a high demand religion so that they can find healing and growth on the other side? And that's how we'll end today.
Go ahead. You want to say something?
You got to take care of your mental health after you leave, because once you've been in this religion, we recommend that people seek therapy, get a little therapist, or something to talk to somebody. What we did was we went back to college, got our degree. We began to rebuild friendships outside of the religion. And then, of course, you want to start looking for ways to, get a career, because a lot of people didn't have a career path when they were Jehovah's Witnesses. And we just really feel like, good association, good wholesome association, and finding friends. And that's one of the biggest things that people have had. I read the comments of our YouTube videos, and I see people saying that they've been gone for 6 or 7 years and they still can't find any friends. And I just started, going to like meetup groups and trying to, meet people that like the same things I like to do, and hobbies and stuff like that. And the other thing I did was I reached back into like my old job I used to work at years ago. And I reached back and started talking to people there, and we friended each other on Facebook. And then we started having like monthly like brunches that we would go out and different stuff like that. So, and we're going to start doing videos too about how people can regain their life after leaving. So be on the lookout for some of those videos as well.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point, and it kind of dovetails with what my mom told us. She said, "Y'all guys need to build a new clientele of friends," and I think because that is the common denominator in most high control groups and cults, is that you have no structure around you once you leave. And so, because you're going to lose everybody who's around you, and most of those groups have told you not to deal with other people, so you have nobody. And so, building a new clientele of friends is very, very important. And you start going back to your high school, start going with your family who are not part of that religion. If you have family members who are not part of the religion, talk to them. Why you never joined us? And you'll be surprised. They say, well, I saw y'all was crazy over there. So, and so you'll get a chance to see that. And that's what we did. We reached back to our non-witness family, and we were shocked. I mean, we have aunts and stuff. I had aunts and stuff. They said, JT, we feel sorry for y'all. Y'all out there at 8, 9, 10-year-old, little suit on, your little briefcase, look like you're an IBM salesman. All the other kids watching Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck, and y'all out there selling books on Saturday. We felt sorry for y'all guys. And then they was like, we glad y'all out. And they welcomed us back into the fold with no regards to anything that passed. It's like we never missed a day. And so we tell people all the time, reach out to all the people on your job you had anything to do with, people you went to school with. When I went back to my class reunion, they were still calling me preacher man. Preacher man, JT preacher man. And so because that's all they remembered. JT was always trying to sell them books around school. And so you reach back and you explain to people, hey man, we left, man. Y'all left? Yeah, man, we left. Had to get out, Chief.
Yeah, definitely tell people. Definitely tell people that you left.
Yeah, let people know you left.
Don't let people keep thinking you still belong.
Because when I got back to that class reunion, everybody like, no, he Jehovah Witness, he Jehovah Witness. And when we told them, they're like, oh, you really left, man? And so be sure to let people know you left, because if not, they will still grade you on the same grading scale. And once you let people know, you will find they're like, man, I always wondered about what happened. Because a lot of the guys I went to school with, because I was taking all college prep classes throughout my entire high school career. And so all the people I knew, they all went to college. And so when we came back, they're like, but JT, I always wonder what happened to you, man. You know, you didn't go to none of the college. We heard that you went to New York or something like that.
You went to Harvard, baby.
Yeah, I went to Watchtower Harvard, you know. So that I think is very important. Like my wife mentioned, you know, starting that new clientele of friends is very crucial. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. Did you guys join another church? Are you guys Christian, or did you guys just kind of stop doing church? I'm just curious.
Well, that was one of the things that, like most witnesses, when you leave, it's the first question you ask, where am I going? Where am I going? And we have the opportunity to go to visit a lot of different churches, a lot of different religions. But what we found out, and this is just a personal observation. And I often tell people this. When you leave, you need to understand what you were just a part of. We were literally spiritually abused. And if you had a friend, she was in a relationship, her husband beat her all the time. You go, they say, girl, you need to leave. You need to stop and, you know, think about what you're doing for your kids. You need to really think about this. And she just won't leave. And then she finally calls you up on the phone and she says, I did the day. I'm leaving. And while you're on the phone, you say, well, girl, I got somebody I want you to meet. Would you do that? No. What you would tell her is, girl, you need to give yourself time to heal. And if you want to get back into a relationship with someone, then you'll be in a better position to do that. And if you don't want to be in a relationship and just be single, that's fine too. And that's what we have observed with people who lead this organization, including ourselves. You need to give yourself time to heal. Because I've seen so many witnesses jump out of one group right into another, and we're talking to them like 2 years later. So we tell people, take your time. Take your time. And if you decide to be a part of another religious belief system, that's up to you. But at least take your time. And that's what we decided to do. You know, like I said, we have friends in vice churches all the time. I just don't think we probably will never become part of a religious group again. Because for us, from our perspective, every time we go to church, man, it just reminds me of being at the Kingdom Hall. We went to one church and this woman treated us like a Bible study.
Oh
Y'all sit with us. And she was just so happy. They with me. And then she was telling, and we heard the message. She said, now, if you really want to get some spiritual food, you need to come to Wednesday night meeting. I'm like, oh Lord, not again. So, you know, we have no problem with people and their religious beliefs. But for us, you know, we're fine right where we are. And maybe down the road we would, but you know, and once again, you know, people are different. Let people be themselves. And that's what we are. And, you know, at this point for us, you know, we found that simply living your life to the very best, that brings us the most happiness. That's just us.
Amen. Preach it. Hallelujah. Gerardo, can I get an amen? Gerardo, can I get an amen? All right. Well, we're going to end on that. So, JT,
hey, man,
Lady
it's
Cee,
been good. Hey, man, it's been good.
We respect you guys, the world. We're cheering you guys on from Salt Lake City, Utah.
Right.
We admire you guys. I want to hang out with you guys. I want to have a root beer with you guys someday.
Hey, if you're ever on the East Coast, look us up.
So you're in the DC area, Virginia,
Yeah.
Maryland?
DC area, yeah.
Okay, I will do that, and you guys too. And if you guys decide you want to have me on your channel, I'd love to come on and
Absolutely.
Yeah.
turn the tables, and you guys can grill me.
We'll have our people call your people.
Yeah, our people call your people.
I love it. All right. JT and Lady Cee, you're awesome.
Right,
Tell
man,
everyone
y'all
again.
guys be good.
Tell everyone again your channel so that they know where to get your stuff.
xjwcriticalthinker.com. That's our YouTube. I mean, that's our web address, and our YouTube is XJW Critical Thinker, and our podcast is The Critical Thoughts.
Yeah.
All right. You guys
All
take
right.
care. Stay
Y'all
safe.
be good. Enjoy the rest of your evening, guys.
Thank you
And
so much.
if we can ever help you guys with anything, don't
Thank
hesitate
you so
to
much,
ask.
man.
I'll
Appreciate
fly
that.
out. Gerardo and I will fly out
All
and
right.
help you guys out. Just
We'll
let
put
us
you
know.
up. We got the room. We'll put you up. All right,
Okay.
then.
Okay. Thanks,
Take care.
guys.
Take care. Bye-bye.
guys
Bye-bye.
take care.
Thank you.
Thanks,
All right, guys.
Gerardo.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
listeners.
Yeah, man. Thanks a lot, guys. Appreciate it, Ronald.
Thanks,
Appreciate
listeners.
that. Yeah.
Okay.
And listeners, thanks for joining us on Mormon Stories. Take care. Be good to each other. Love each other. Be kind. Find joy. That's the best revenge, is living a happy, healthy life. You heard it from JT and Lady Cee here. Thanks to everyone who supports us on Mormon Stories Podcast. Stay tuned. We'll see you guys again soon. Again, be good to each other. Bye, guys.